Order. How you doing? I just came from mid-70s, so.
No, he was on last week. Oh, just him.
Down here, Tappan, down here in New Orleans.
So, can we keep me on?
So as we drove up, it just got sadder and sadder.
Yeah.
All right.
Next week.
Alright, so.
Is that a little too long?
These are.
It's like some bonds.
Alright, just for audio records, the attendance here, you've got Pam, Sid, Paul, Linda, Ellie, Sarai, Shelley, Brian, I will call Paul, because I can explain, Jen, and Eddie, as well as Councilman Starr, our morning guest, and myself. So, is there anything that we need to carry over from Thursday's meeting before we dive into Articles 5 and 6?
Of course.
I can solve a few more.
So we basically got through Article 4. We greenlined what we could, everything that we either had a question on or we had decided to kick down the road, is in red. I will get an updated color code draft, put up on the OneDrive as soon as possible, like right after this meeting. For purposes of today, I don't know how much Article 4 really needs to affect the discussion today. I think that's really probably about it. Luckily, we aren't dependent on what happened on Thursday for what we need to do today, so.
Alright. Do we need to present the on the screen, or is everybody got copies?
I have a copy, but
I would love on the screen if someone could put it up, I forgot.
I can then, or I can put my, I can turn on.
Sorry.
You should write a color draft. All the work.
I didn't want to send, I didn't want to send a precedent. I didn't want to bring them.
I know.
It's forward.
I think you said it best.
I thought about it this morning, but I would have like.
Thank you.
They probably have St. Patrick's Day ones too.
That sounds terrible.
Don't start talking about food, you'll make it
Yeah.
fun.
So while we're getting set up, I had this idea about emergency legislation. What if we don't use the word emergency?
Well, he said that it was a legal term, and so I think we had.
Yeah, emergency has a statutory meaning.
Well, yeah, but we have a charter.
Yeah.
I think it's all called a term apart, right? It's one of those things like, the world knows what it means.
In your defense, Pam, I don't actually think there's any reason that we couldn't define, for purposes of the charter, the use of the word immediate and then have it be called immediate legislation, but
Well, I think.
Something that's not so charged.
Well, the public's problems with too many emergency situations, or they'll think maybe we aren't, acting on it.
Well, they think
So
it's a
we
real
keep the
emergency.
word emergency going.
I think you just said, if you separated it, you have emergency, immediate, and everything else. But I don't know.
Their complaints are.
Before you
about
know it.
emergency.
The president of the United States will be calling for emergencies just because the village does. All kinds of things.
just a second. Work on getting that.
Well, I thought it would be fun. Just, we could even have a brainstorming expedited or, all these different.
I have no problem with it, but it's also not a hill that I particularly
No.
rely on, so. I'm also, I guess now that you're making me think about it, I would be a little worried about if we called it something else, but it still does the same thing. There are gonna be some people who will vote no on the charter because they'll think that we're hiding it.
That was my exact point a minute ago.
That actually,
Was it? I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Okay.
Their complaints are about emergency.
How about
And so
sort of,
we need to deal with it so they understand.
quasi-emergency?
Somewhere.
The only thing I would look if you had another in between,
Yeah.
or you still have emergency.
Like where something real.
Yeah, something that was needed quickly, but it's not.
like really, 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 really important legislation.
That's actually what's
Or legislation that will call one wrong an emergency.
But then you get into, well, how many categories do you have?
At least 10.
The board will understand if we keep emergency on the list.
Each one has a different
process.
Please let that client names up on that website. Nothing, you saw nothing.
I wasn't looking.
Can you see? Yeah. Alright.
All right, so Article 5 and 6. The primary issues underlying many of the decisions to be made in Articles 5 and 6, which are mayor and administrator, is the role of the mayor contrasted with the role of the administrator. So in other words, this is where we tease those two apart. If the administrator is assumed to be the primary manager of the Minerva Parks government, who has primary oversight over the administrator, council, or mayor? And will the charter assign any of the Minerva Parks administrative functions to the mayor instead of the administrator? He has, as always, included examples of how other charters handle this, and then given us a list of issues and questions to kind of work through. So unless there's any objections, let's just start down through that list. All right. So the first one, what powers will be delegated to the mayor? He gave some examples of New Albany, Charter, Port, Tascola, and Pickerington. So that's it for those.
I like New Albany, it's just very nicely laid out, and it had some of those, things that we've seen in a lot of, almost all the charters, the ceremonial, some of the judicial kinds of things, the military powers, etc. And it's just nicely laid out.
And which one was that?
That's New Albany. Others will do it more in, paragraph form,
Okay.
and this one was just nicely laid out. and numbered.
So most of them. So they would have these firm design, powers and committees, and powers and duties, that's what
I really
they're.
don't, I mean, we have it on the screen, but this is the only copy I've got, I'm sorry.
So we've decided that the mayor is elected and is not gonna be elected out of the council.
Correct.
Correct.
So that
We got that one. We did a 4-year term, did we stick with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Qualifications / eligibility / human run. Electors of the village, residents of the municipality. Need not be a full-time official, AKA they can hold another job. Not council.
Is there any non-elected?
Right. So actually, this one says mayor shall not hold any other public office during term except the mayor.
I'm sorry, which charter are
Which
you?
one are you thinking?
Go for it.
Oh, here, go for it.
Not that we can't, the other ones is the other way out too, but I just thought that one was pretty basic and clear.
So,
And for those things, do we want to add anything or mitigate?
Oh, I see, he started with powers.
yeah, I almost kind of, I'm not trying to be adjourned, I almost kind of wonder if we should come back to question one, because it seems like there's some other questions we really need to answer. But frankly, that paragraph up ahead, are we putting the mayor in charge of the administrator, or is council in charge of the administrator? Because that really is going to affect the duties and powers of the mayor, right? So I think that's really probably the first fundamental question we should answer. I know what my preference is, but I feel like I'll be disagreed with. So,
Really?
yeah.
I think that we opted for a form of government with mayor because we wanted the mayor to run point between the administrator and council.
Yeah.
Right, so, I mean, that's why we made that selection, we should stick with that, in my opinion, right?
I would like to,
So the mayor would be the person to whom the administrator reports.
Yes.
Right. I think, while we're flapping our gums, I think conceptually,
Like that at all. Well, I don't like it either. I don't like it either, but Brian's right. We compromised on the mayor, manager, council form of government. And I don't think it's any better, truthfully, if the manager reports to the council. I think it's just as bad.
Well, and I think.
Neither one is good, but we gotta choose one.
Well, and I think that we made that decision based on the influence of the administrator from OPEX, who was very strongly in favor of the idea that the administrator needs only one master,
Exactly.
only reporting to one person, and therefore reporting to the mayor.
so I think conceptually, what I like to voice is what I see as the duty of this mayor to be is, right, the single point management of the administrator, right, and then an ombudsman for the people, right? So if the people feel that their council isn't getting done what needs done, right, their point of contact would then be the mayor, right? If it's an administrative function, when someone, when there's a pothole, people shouldn't call the mayor, they should call the administrator, right? When there's a water line broken, they shouldn't call the mayor, they should call the administrator. But when council is not moving forward with a piece of legislation, right, and they voice their problems to council and voice their problem, then the mayor needs to be the one who represents the people as a sort of an ombudsman kind of role. That's how I would like to see these duties pan out.
I think so really, I'm gonna add a second fundamental question, because I think we kind of need answers to both before we can really work through these questions in the memo. So the first question, as we have established, is who is the administrator answer to? I feel like no one is voicing disagreement at this point, but yeah,
I
sorry.
have to give it up, so.
So,
No, you can stick to your guns.
yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
we will continue to discuss the first question, which is, does the administrator answer to the mayor or the council? Because that will affect the duties and responsibilities of the mayor. But then the second fundamental question really, and this is a little in the weeds, but it's a question that needs answered. Are we envisioning Minerva Park having a full-time mayor, part-time administrator, or a part-time mayor, full-time administrator? I see strengths and weaknesses to both, but at the end of the day, the answer to that question also greatly affects who's going to be responsible for what, who will people be calling, who will be making decisions. I think that makes a big difference.
I think I've always visualized a part-time mayor and a full-time administrator.
Me too.
Because the people that work here, we need to have somebody on that can tell them, tasks and things to do and meetings to get the work done and just.
Who's all the staff report to? Administrator?
Yeah.
Administrator.
So how does that compare to what the actions that are going on today? I mean, is there a balance of power? Is the man that?
What we have going on today is,
She has the final, he or she has the final word on what happens to the administrator?
it's hard, I think it's kind of apples and oranges, between the setup we're envisioning and the way it is today, right? Because we don't have an administrator. We have Eric, but he's not even, he can't be compared to an administrator, I don't
We
think.
have a mayor that has quite a bit of power.
But only because They're in my opinion, primarily because they have the institutional knowledge of the village.
Right, the mayor position in Minerva Park has a lot of power right now, not because the mayor's been given a lot of power officially, but just kind of organically. The mayor has a lot of ability to affect things whether they should or
I
not.
think that the mayor has been given power by the state because most of the employees report to the mayor, the police reports to the mayor.
That's by our statute.
Yeah,
But that's not the state statute, that's either by our ordinances
Or history.
or history, right? If you, yeah, it's not a state power given to the mayor, it's a power given either by our ordinances or our history. Again, I think a lot of that goes back to institutional knowledge. You're the person who knows where the bread knife is. When it comes time to cut the bread, everybody's got to come.
And here's where we get back to Brian's story, right, with the stop sign. Why was the mayor able to single-handedly stop the execution of something that council had voted on in order to put in place, right? I don't understand personally how that was even possible, let alone how it happened.
So the mayor is the person who engaged in the contract, and so if the person who engaged in the contract calls up the vendor and says, hey, wait, stop that work.
Could this happen then in our scenario too?
Sure, maybe. But again, it wouldn't be the mayor who would have, sort of the, part of the issue with, in my opinion, with a mayor who is a resident and these are their neighbors. That person has a more emotionally invested point in this outcome, right? So a mayor, and particularly our mayor, doesn't want to disappoint the neighbor, right? Doesn't want the neighbor to say, I asked this of the mayor and they said no. That is because of all the emotion that goes into it. That's why an administrator who administrates, right, who does not have that emotional, oh yeah, I'm gonna have to see you with wine and cheese, and and you're gonna be mad at me then, and I don't want you mad at me with wine and cheese, so I'm gonna, bend when I shouldn't. That is again my reasoning, part of my reasoning for why that administrator role is so important. But I will also, while I'm still flapping my gums, go back to, I don't think this body should be deciding who's part-time, who's full-time. I think we should dream up the list of responsibilities, and the council will be the body that decides what that looks like on paper. Are these duties full-time duties? Are these duties part-time?
I disagree with
No,
that.
that
If we draw up a list of responsibilities and duties for both positions, then we are defining which one is full-time and which one is part-time. Because one of them is going to have more and one of them is going to have less.
I disagree, because how one does a job also depends on whether or not it's full-time or part-time.
It involves costs too. I mean,
You can give me a list of things to do and give you that same list to do, and I bet you we can accomplish those two lists very differently, but effectively. And I could do it you could do it in 20 minutes, and I could take a week.
So also the thing is, as time goes on, it seems
It
to
could
me
change.
that we might have a certain amount of money available to pay those people, but maybe not in the future sometime. So if we may not be able to afford what we set up.
Or we could find ourselves in a scenario where we have, the greatest of public administrators move in, run for mayor, and now we actually have somebody who could genuinely serve the role of administrator in the village. And the need for that professional is less because we have the time on hand, but it's required in the charter, so those times could be shifted. I'm just saying that to name this is part-time, this is full-time in the charter is limiting in those ways that we have said we shouldn't be limiting. I think we should dream up the responsibilities, right, enumerate them, and then whether or not it's part-time or full-time is in the enactment, is in the doing.
One point I want to make about the power that you mentioned about contracts. And Ben mentioned about the position of mayor having all of the people report down, and then you've got the contracts. it sounds like we're gonna be in the same exact format that we're at now. We have the position of the mayor, who's got all the people, she's got the person that's going to hire all the people report to her. So she has direct control, or he has direct control over all of the staff. And then you've got all of the contracts, it's the same thing. If your manager tells you not to sign a contract, you're not gonna sign. So I'm just worried that we're in the same exact position that we are now, where we've got one person that controls all the people, one person that controls all the contracts. They will make that position with a stop sign, stop the contract because, well, I need to stop it because I feel it's in the best interest. And so I think I can do it because I have the power.
And the mayor can fire the administrator.
We didn't say that. We did not say that.
Yeah, but still.
No.
There's that, like, he said, people calling and crying, and the mayor gets, all upset.
Well, Shelley, most of these define how you remove the administrator, and it usually goes back to council.
I'm
So let's
not,
check on that.
I'm not necessarily opposed to having I'm not trying to say that the mayor should not have that position of administrator report to that person. It's just, there's some of the things that I came about months ago about saying something about, you had mentioned talking to somebody and you got yelled at by the mayor.
Oh, yeah.
Threatening you with a lawsuit or something or whatever.
Yeah, but is this?
Why was that even a possibility in this community that I don't understand that.
Right.
And that would just totally piss me off.
So
I did.
I think that, well, first of all, I think stuff like that happens all the time in cities and villages all across the United States. Mayors and councils fight and they threaten each other with lawsuits. That is a regular occurrence in American politics, and don't kid
In a small
yourself.
village like this.
Yes, don't kid yourself, that's a regular occurrence. Now, having said that, we are back to form of government at this point.
Right.
Yeah, and that's not where we're at.
So,
No, I acquiesce.
So- we.
Now we're figuring out balances of power. on that.
Right, but I mean, this was the thing, if we only had an administrator, who did the administrator report to? It would be the council, which meant that the administrator would have 7 bosses, which is an untenable
And I
situation.
agree with you. I don't
Right.
think we should have, but what I'm saying is,
And at the end of the day, the concern about ticking off your neighbors is just as true for council as it is for.
Yeah.
Any elected official is gonna have that pressure in a small community.
But it's not true for the administrator. It's not.
So here's the thing, is I think that we can say that the mayor can't fire the administrator. We can say that the administrator, reports to the mayor. We can say that the council determines the priorities for the administrator. But 7 council members can't go into the administrator's office and harass that administrator.
So
I don't like that idea.
I think we've gone really far off the rails here, so let's maybe try to circle back.
But
They're all good points, but I don't know what we're trying to.
To come back.
Well, because I don't know what we're trying to
Full-time,
establish.
part-time, I just.
Full-time, part-time is where we're at though.
Yeah.
Like, we've gone way over here, so I just want to bring it back to the,
Full-time, part-time.
yeah. full-time.
I'm sorry
I
about
looked
the
through the
engineer,
ones
firefighter,
that we
but with
put
the
in.
administrator, I really do.
I was looking through the ones and
Otherwise,
others,
it's 2+.
I mean, that was one of the things that, the administrator will bet said too.
Mayor, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
You're rightfully looking at this from a charter position. From a more practical position, these administrators work on a contractual basis. They are not rarely, if ever, at-will employees. So walking into their office and saying you're fired is a difficult at best and task for a mayor to begin with, and buying out that contract would be something that council would need council approval anyway. So you're already looking at a team effort in order to replace an administrator if necessary.
I don't necessarily agree with that because it really comes down to the contract.
It does come down.
Contractual employees are still at-will employees 99% of the time.
I guess my point is that there's going to be consequences to firing an administrator such that I think we're capable of overstating the danger of a mayor simply repetitively firing administrators until they get one that's in their pocket.
And aren't there oftentimes with consent of council, hired as consent of council?
Yeah, so there's checks and balances in those cities, that the mayor determines who they want to hire as the administrator, and then council has to approve it. And then vice versa.
So like the Tuscola, mayor shall appoint city administrator who shall take office upon confirmation by the council by a majority vote of its members.
Right, so you've got a check and balance there, and I think.
City administrator shall serve at the pleasure of the mayor, and the council mayor and the council, and may be suspended or removed from office without cause by the mayor with the consent of the council granted by a majority vote. Or by the council by 2/3 vote without the consent of the mayor.
So checks and balances can be built in.
I think all that sounds reasonable, but in our charter, it should be a number and not,
Well, yeah,
but yeah.
and always convert what we read in the other charters to the numbers that we've already decided to start using.
That language is fine, but
And what language?
I'm looking at, I'm just going through now, I'm looking at Pataskala. That was, what I just read was in Pataskala.
And most of them do, like Brian had mentioned, other than saying that the mayor, does not need to be full-time, that, they don't set out if it's full-time or part-time, and council decides. It's more likely to say that the administrator has the skills and abilities to be an administrator.
So it doesn't define hire, it does say can be part-time, it doesn't say it has to be,
Right.
or can't be full-time.
and that language I'm fine with, but I'm naming this is a part-time mayor.
Right.
This is a part-time mayor, I think that is.
I'm not, I mean, I think I have seen it somewhere, but I'm not seeing it in these examples.
Because it needs to change, and
So for your purposes, Mr. Director, where do we need to go next? We decided that we don't need to find this full-time, part-time.
What I'm hearing is we don't need to enforce full-time, part-time in the charter itself.
we can say it can be, but not it shall be.
So there's language in the other charters about full-time, part-time, and how it's not, like it specifically says, this does not dictate.
So,
The problem I'm worried that we run into, I guess, if council makes mayor a full-time position, I assume it would have to, that's my concern is that it's not defined, right? So if you did it by somehow council rule, you wouldn't do it by council rule.
No.
You would have to do it by ordinance, I guess. So then if that ordinance were to ever be amended or repealed, there'd be a legislative process for that. So it's not like I don't have to worry about a consistency issue.
so I'm not sure. I can see where you said you want a part-time administrator and a full-time mayor.
No,
It was the other way around.
Right.
You want a full-time
And-
mayor
and
and a
then Brian
part-time
said-
administrator.
we shouldn't be, saying which one, and I like road report, because road report says the mayor need not be a full-time official and may have other employment. And,
My only issue is right now we have a part-time mayor now, right?
Yeah.
And that's all we have.
Well,
So and we
and
have,
things don't get done.
we have a part-time mayor who I'm certain if you ask, will tell you they put more than 20 hours a week into their part-timeness. To Pam's point, things still don't get done. And so we, I feel it is foolhardy to say full-time or part-time. I think that we need to lay out the responsibilities and let the people who are fulfilling those responsibilities figure out what that means. Because again, I can tell you, my job description in my professional life is do the things. Now, the person who sits next to me is doing the same things I'm doing, but I can tell you they spend a heck of a lot more time at it than I do, right? But we both have strong performance reviews because I'm more efficient and they are not, or vice versa, right? The person who sits on the other side is the exact opposite story, right? Or, again, we should say what we need these people to get done. And then the rest is what happens in the implementation. We are not implementing here.
So one of the concerns that I've had since the process started is making sure that there is, in addition to have everything being transparent and everything being clearly defined, I also wanted to personally kind of address some of the issues that you guys have kept bringing up, which is, the whole, well, what's the incentive for anyone to run for these offices? Maybe rather than, and so in my mind, it was, well, okay, if we make mayor full-time and the pay was commensurate to a full-time position, then we'll get a good mayor because someone will run for it who actually wants to do the work. Maybe we just solve this problem by saying, but kind of all these positions need to be properly greased with the correct amount of money, both council, mayor, administrator, everything.
But is that outside charter?
It is. It's a concern that I have, and it's why I'm kind of hesitant about the whole full-time, part-time thing, right?
No, I get it. I mean, I had those same thoughts about in practical application, what would this look like? And what makes the most sense financially?
Because if we're paying a part-time administrator 20 grand, we aren't gonna get a good one. If we're paying a part-time mayor 15 grand, we're not gonna get a good one. Who's gonna spend, as Brian said, probably more than 20 hours a week for 15 grand? No one's gonna wanna do
The
that,
thing
right?
is that,
duties, if it's.
Right.
but the thing is that I get what you're saying because I've been having this same
Yeah,
these same thought processes, but I disagree about the money enticing a more qualified person to run for mayor.
Oh.
I don't necessarily think that will happen.
Oh, I do. I very
I
much,
know
I
you do.
very
I know
much
you
think
tell
that-
you, and I don't think that's
What's the
fair.
part-time they're paid now?
Well, if I could just jump in, does it matter for our conversation this morning?
I think it
I
does.
think so.
Okay, well, I'm just struggling with you.
I think one thing too is we need to have enough flexibility to, as we go through the years,
To change it.
not tie down
Yeah,
people to a certain amount of money, because we may not have the same amount of money 10 years from now.
absolutely.
I think I've always envisioned, I was agreeing with Pam, I've always envisioned a part-time mayor that we take away some of the responsibilities we give to a full-time administrator that manages the day-to-day operations of the village, has the people report to them. And then you've got, when you said, your things can get done, but you still have a mayor that is a mayor for the people and it's part-time.
Okay, so first, to answer the question, the current part-time mayor is 30 grand plus benefits, right?
It's like a total compensation package of like 40,
Yeah, maybe 45.
Yeah.
But,
something like that.
yeah, but, right, to include the cost of those benefits. So secondly, my point here is not to disagree that the mayor should be full-time or part-time. My point is that we should write down those duties,
Yeah,
right? We should write down those duties. Once we have a complete list, the people who will be implementing those duties will determine whether or not they feel a person can do those duties in a part-time fashion or a full-time fashion, or whether or not they will only pay a person a part-time salary to do them. We will not control the salary. This room will never control the salary. We control the list of duties.
I don't disagree with you really on any of those points, except that the fact that if we go into this charter and we don't have a defined part-time and full-time, then people are gonna be questioning, well, is this gonna be a part-time position? We can't answer that question. Well, you can pass the charter where we could have 2 full-time people or 2 part-time.
Can you just explicitly say that this is determined by council?
People are gonna ask that question.
we are gonna explicitly say one way or the
So
other.
then that answers
So
it.
then the answer.
Well, and the answer also is we've written this not for next year, we've written this for the next 100 years. So that's to be determined by council, and if that changes in 20 years, we specifically wrote this to be able to last that long.
All
That's
right.
compared to,
The other way to address that, I'll offer one more way to address that, is you enumerate your responsibilities. You say, as a body, this is what we feel is necessary to operate our village effectively, right? Now, if someone can do this in a part-time way, that's great. If they can't, then it needs to be done, right? These are the things that have to be done, part-time, full-time. It's silly to, I've always found it silly to argue whether a job is full-time or part-time, when what really has to happen is it has to get done, right? So like, I got a stack of wood, right? Am I gonna, I can only spend 2 hours to stack the pile of wood. Well, it's 3 hours wood stacking, but I only have 2 hours to do it.
All right,
No, it's a job that has to get done.
let's do this. Let's go ahead and do what Brian is suggesting, and if I still have the same concerns at the end, I'll complain about it.
Yes. Let's do that.
So,
So defining powers,
what powers will be delegated to mayor? So I would say, let's just go ahead and look at the different samples and see kind of which one we like best, since he gave us a list. So, New Albany is 3.02B.
yeah, your screen back.
Oh.
Wiggle mouse.
That's the TV.
Oh, did the TV timer? Oh,
Program not to work
There's a
all
whole
the time on
thing.
Sundays.
Don't do this to me, Chair.
So it makes me-
And listen, Kelly, you are gonna have to do better today, because we're both Irish, we have to manage to stick together today, friend.
Oh, yeah,
I may or may not have been
that's
listening.
the
We are,
conflict.
we're so good at that.
I may or may not have been listening to the Mum Jacks on the way over, so.
All right, so that is.
Don't tell me that either.
That looks like it's
That looks like
New
New
Albany.
Albany.
Yeah, I'm in Albany.
I'm not gonna lie, I like New Albany just because I like the format, but that doesn't mean the others don't serve you too well.
So the problem, if I remember, so the problem with New Albany's is a lot of it is, written such that mayor is sitting on council. So like 1, 2.
Yeah.
1 and 2 are gone. I feel like there was some others still.
Let's just go through the list.
Actually, yeah, so it might just be 1 and 2. So 1 and 2 would be gone. Ceremonial duties is obvious.
But if you skip 3.
That is ceremony.
Sorry, 3 is ceremonial duties.
It is B3.
I've got those on the screen right now.
I'm sorry, I was in the wrong place. We're good now. Any help?
Oh, yeah, this is something, we or do we not have the ability, if we wish, I'm not suggesting that we do we or do we not have the ability to eliminate the mayor's court?
I think we absolutely do.
The state is trying to get rid of mayor's courts.
They are.
In a lot of the conversations, it really takes away some power in the village.
It does.
Enforce ordinances, zoning ordinances, and those kinds of things.
Oh,
It's not, it's not something that really just want to get rid of.
Speaking as an attorney who has worked in mayor's courts before, my partner does my law partner does a lot of work in mayor's courts. Number 1, it's a source of revenue for the village. Number 2, it does allow you to exercise some control over your local community in a way that you don't initially think about, right? So for minor misdemeanors, things like speeding, things like driving with a suspended license, having a marijuana butt in your front seat, well, it allows you to exert some really up close and personal conversational power over the people in your local community, because they're not driving downtown, they're coming here to the mayor's court and they're talking to someone here about how their actions are affecting this community. So I'm in favor of mayor's courts.
Let's see again.
Is your concern?
Less administrative costs.
The only way that I'm in favor of mayor's courts is if eliminating a mayor's court also reduces our ability to enforce other things, like what Pam said, zoning, and if it affects other things, then,
That's why.
because I have to come to the council meeting and scream at you guys about
I think
the zoning issue.
I think it affects the nature of how those things are enforced, right? So my impression of mayor's court, and people can tell me I'm wrong, is that it allows your community, right, and by your community, I mean your mayor, to direct how it's enforced. So for a zoning issue, right, the zoning ordinance will say the rule, how it's to be implemented, and what the penalties are. But in the mayor's court, they can wiggle a little bit. They can say, yes, we understand that you, Paul, broke your leg, and that's why your lawn isn't mowed after two requests. We're gonna give you an extra week.
It's called prosecutorial and judicial
Yes.
discretion.
But sending it downtown, you will get less of that, because they don't really care. They don't know Paul.
They're in a hurry to get that case over.
Yeah, they want to push it through, and they have the rules in front of them, and they don't know Paul, he's not part of their
And
community.
they also have wiggle room, but it's different wiggle room. The city prosecutor's office has its own metrics that it needs to.
So they could completely dismiss it. and they don't dismiss it.
Right, go ahead.
We are in the process of trying to crack down on some of the stuff going on or not going on Cleveland Avenue. And the mayor's court is an important tool in that, for not just for us to have the ability to say, if this comes in front of mayor's court, we're going to lower the boom. If this comes in front of mayor's court, we're going to work with you.
And I'm gonna play
Please
the role
don't take
of,
away mayor's
I'm gonna
court.
play the role of Evan. Does anyone in this room not want mayor's court? Cool, let's move on.
There we go.
Thanks, Ed.
I just realized someone usually stops us now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Perform all ceremonial duties and functions as necessary for non-administrative purposes, that's like that keeper.
Yeah, judicial powers, functions granted to mayors, and authority and discretion to appoint a magistrate. So 4 and 5 are wrapped up in mayor's court as well as other things. If we really needed to, we could the mayor could choose to appoint a magistrate, or they could do the job themselves. They would, I would assume, work with council and, the financial officer on that, because you pay a magistrate separately.
That is what we do currently.
Yeah.
So this is a point with approval.
Which, let me tell you how much I want to be a magistrate someday.
Chief spokesperson for the village.
Right, that's kind of a standard duty of a mayor.
Military powers and functions,
May
mysterious.
may I add something that would be helpful to number 6?
Sure.
It says with other governments, if we could add something that says with dealing with the media as well, that's something that is currently coming up with council, whose job it is to be the primary point of contact with the media, et cetera. I personally believe it makes sense then that should be the elected official, the mayor, but whomever y'all decide it to be, specifying who that sole point of contact is would be very helpful to the council.
Well, I get it. It would be helpful, and we should define it. It's still not gonna keep Tony Benedetti from running to the media.
Yeah,
Anytime.
nothing's gonna keep Tony, I
Right.
just wanna know,
Alright,
I just wanna put out.
Right.
Whose job is.
Right.
Tony would agree with that.
It's still not gonna keep anyone who's unhappy to run the 6 on your side.
But it will get 600 cents after the official person.
So I'm
Yes.
looking, frankly, a lot of the rest of, like, 4, 5, 6, I don't personally have a problem with adding media liaison,
Yeah.
to 6.
So would it make more sense for the administrator to do that, since they went to
That
college?
would be my preference, but yeah.
The
They would
press
be
is
the
gonna choose
professional
that,
person who
the
is.
press is gonna choose they want to interview anyway.
Yeah,
That's,
There's-
well, there could be a policy though of, if it's in the charter that this is the mayor's job or the administrator's job, and I prefer mayor.
yeah.
I can't vote.
I would prefer that the elected official be the one that talks to
Then
the
the idea
media.
is, it would be.
The person that
media,
has
everybody
the
else to go,
familiarity
"Hey, you gotta talk to me." So.
I don't think that the administrator really needs, it's not bad, it's just more, here's the official person to go to, so the media doesn't go public for different people. I mean, this is the one that we've said is the official.
I can tell you that the media is going to go around poking, I'm not sure how many
We can't
cards
fix
I
that.
have taken off of our front door with the reporter's name and phone number written on it, saying, Jennifer Pocket, call me.
All right, so.
We can't stop that, but we can say who we want it to be, regardless of whether or not they.
If I might just
So
add,
let's.
this would be more it would be then the job of the mayor, et cetera, to affirmatively put out a statement or something like that, rather than be the person who receives media attention, which is something outside of our control. This would be an affirmative duty.
I don't
All
know.
you have to do is stipulate.
All right, I
Yeah,
would like,
Brian and I disagree with you, and Soraya, big surprise. I don't actually want it to be the mayor who's the official spokesperson. I would rather it be the administrator. Because we could, as in the case of Obetz, potentially end up with someone who is mayor, who's very smart and very good at their professional capacity, but they're a pipe fitter. They don't have a degree in English. They don't have education in media relations. They have no training or education, and it would be the mayor, that person, who's talking to the media.
Well, then it is incumbent upon that person to understand that there are rights there and to engage the appropriate people in said communication.
I don't necessarily know that you're gonna get that kind of
I
willingness.
think a clear way to say it is that an expectation of a professional administrator is that they have some amount of training, skill, or experience in public relations and public communications.
I don't think that's guaranteed at all.
I don't think that's guaranteed at all, I don't think that's taught as part of an administrative
Nothing is-
program.
Nothing is guaranteed, right? So we shouldn't bank on what's guaranteed. We should bank on expectations. And that is
I also think that our
expectations.
community is not OBETs, and the likelihood of somebody with no college education running as mayor in this community is basically slim to none.
I don't know.
Barely guaranteed.
I know.
Nearly
that's
guaranteed.
exactly counsel.
Right.
So,
I don't think that that's a great plan.
If we put it on the community,
Is there some issue with, since the administrator does report to the mayor, the administrator is in charge of media, the mayor could at times not be happy. I mean, like, it just seems like the
But
buck,
I would expect the mayor to shape that message, right? That's what I would expect, but I would expect a professional administrator to be the one, when at all possible, to be delivering the message.
I like her idea the best.
To leave it to council?
No, to say that someone needs to be appointed by council to do that job.
No.
That's a terrible idea.
Yeah, I think that's a
Because what
bad
will
idea.
happen then is the person who's the loudest, whether they are the best speaker, whether they have the best message, the best
So-
ability to deliver it.
So can we all agree on that? We want someone to be designated as, this is the official spokesperson for the village. Regardless of who it is, we all want that to be defined.
Somewhere.
Somewhere.
So the
Can we all agree on that?
Yes.
I don't
Okay.
particularly care, but yes, I agree.
You don't hate the idea. Okay, so let's table that. We like the idea. We don't know where it fits. We will keep it in the back of our heads and keep going through duties and see if we maybe can figure it out.
were we okay with the mayor being the person dealing with the governments? Or are we still talking about that?
No, that we're talking about
I
it.
actually think that that's a good role for the administrator as well.
I think
And I
the
can
mayor, it needs to be the person dealing with other governments.
Why?
Because they're dealing with other mayors.
Okay, and other administrators, because other governments that don't have a mayor would presumably send their administrator.
I don't know that that's.
Well, they do have a mayor.
Well,
Who's
you
a
said-
member of
If
council.
you have a council and a
What
manager,
do you think the advantage is for the administrator?
again,
The same thing?
we are aiming towards a professional administration.
Well, it's like if the president goes to China, he's not talking to the president and making all these deals. It's his people on his team and the equivalent people.
But then the presidents sign off on whatever the
Exactly.
deal is.
So why can't both of them be?
It can absolutely be both. I don't think we need to get down to that level of detail. Here's the bottom line, if it's the mayor's duty to communicate with Worthington, and the mayor runs into a problem in terms of communication or figuring out language on a contract or whatever, then the mayor shall employ the services of their administrator.
So here's where I'm having a problem right now. I am having a hard time imagining what we're leaving left over for the administrator. Because if the administrator's duties are going to be whatever the mayor asks of them, I don't think that we've put enough on that.
So
That
let's-
many things yet.
So wait, let's keep that in the back of our heads, and maybe
We'll
plan
see.
those duties
That's where
before
I
we
feel
decide
the
if there
road.
aren't enough things for them to do.
All right.
Let's kick it down the road a little bit. So we're gonna skip 6.
Yeah, table.
Well,
There's
we
a lot
also have
There's a lot of camps on the road.
exercise of military powers and functions. I'm assuming that this is basically just making sure that we have home rule authority in the event that a militia should ever be required, in which case I'm not caring too much about the charter anymore.
All right.
I have a question about 8, performing, okay, this one's screen. Exercise such other powers, duties, and functions as provided by this charter and council rules to the extent such council rules are consistent with this charter.
That sounds like a.
I don't like it being council rules, I kind of want it to be ordinance.
Explain to me the difference in your head.
So council rules are a temporary year-by-year thing with no real oversight, no oversight at all by the people, because council votes on its own rules, and that's just it, that's all she wrote, and ordinance is all law. So I don't want council to be able to futz around with the mayor's duties and authorities
So,
by rule year over year and how to change and blah, blah, blah. I want this to be kind of a more
On the other side of that, is
long-term
there
thing.
anything legitimate that the council rules or ask the mayor that you just silly or make ordinance? I don't know.
So here's my reading of this, right, that the council rules could add duties to the mayor, right? They cannot take away duties.
Right, because
So
Yeah.
it could be that the council decides that the mayor, I don't even know, I'm having a hard time imagining. Could be the spokesperson, or could be they're the one who.
Add to but not take away is still a really powerful tool. They could add that the mayor must engage in a 45-day wait period before enacting any instructions to the administrator. That's a council rule that can be formed pretty darn easily.
will that be consistent with the charter?
I don't see why it wouldn't.
I think that that's something we could address.
And that's what I'm trying to address. I'm saying it should be by resolution, if not ordinance at least. I don't like that it's council rules.
Well, council rules are adopted by resolution.
That's true. Sorry. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I kind of want it to be ordinance. I can absolutely be outvoted here. I'm the one bringing up this nitpicky issue.
Well, and I don't necessarily like care one way or the other, I just was struggling to understand why
Yeah.
it mattered.
To me, it matters because of the lack of oversight and the fact that it changes literally every year as opposed to having some more permanence to it.
Shall I read that? Makes sense.
Growth Court's paragraph on this, Kelly, is 10.
Yeah.
Perform such other powers, duties, and functions as provided under this charter, the municipality's ordinance and resolutions, and the laws of Ohio. Does it say what?
Yeah, it's good.
Growth Court,
With the exception,
5.03 B10.
geez, I was in the wrong section. That's why I was so confused.
that's what happens when
Yeah, no, that,
I like that.
and it would happen to be in a council rule, it would, but it does talk about ordinances and resolutions.
I like it. That makes me much happier.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that one. Okay.
one more time, one more election, only one.
Is there any more from the other charters under powers, duties, and functions of the mayor that you want to entertain? Added to our list of things that you like? So fix all official documents from instruments of municipality, mayor seal, I don't know. I don't remember seeing that in the law, I don't know if that's.
Yeah, Nobody's is actually kind of bare bone almost compared to a couple of the others.
Now, growth court, on the first page, B1, and this is something we have to decide with the mayor's duties. Some municipalities do have the mayor be the person that oversees the police department.
No.
Well, I'm saying that that's what
you say.
Yeah, that's a pretty classic,
Mayor is
that's
the
kind of a pretty classic thing.
because of the judicial part, probably within the military department.
Right.
The police are an executive agency.
Yeah. Yeah.
However, but again, I think that was another animal is to looking for a more professional way about things.
So here's I'm not interested in giving the mayor a lot of power. I'm not
Quick time
interested.
out, quick time out. I thought you guys were trying to imply you wanted it switched over to the council. If.
Are you out of your mind?
That would be an
That's why I was
Are
really,
you
really
out
upset.
Out of your mind.
That's-
I didn't
thought you
realize
should
that
feel
you were
about it.
trying to say it should be administrator instead of mayor.
So I don't want the mayor to have a ton of power. You already know this. I don't want the council to run amok. I do want a system of checks and balances, but we have had a significant problem with both mayor and council being involved in HR issues. This has cost us money repeatedly. A professional, AKA an administrator, needs to be in charge of all HR issues.
So let me see if I can maybe help clarify this a little bit. I think what these charters are envisioning and what I have in my head is the mayor is not supposed to be sitting at a desk in the police department. The mayor's job is to approve or deny hiring and firing of police officers and changes to police department rules. But in terms of the day-to-day functions of, hey, I need you guys to go patrol this street, it's been real bad lately, I think that's an administrator job.
I don't,
Pretty clearly.
Chief's job. I don't think.
I just have a hard time with, first of all, anybody that's any professional, any kind of organization that have a manager and another manager, like we did at Chase. You take direction, if your managing director tells you to do something, you're gonna do it. That's just the way that it is. Whether your manager or your other manager tells you to do it, whatever, it supersedes everything that they say. And that's just the way it's gonna be. So to me, I'm still struggling with if we give the power to administrator, I mean, I agree that the chief of police or whatever needs to report to administrator. That would be my take. But they're still gonna get direction from the mayor, regardless of what happens. If the
You're right.
administrator reports to the mayor,
And
the
there's
mayor
no
wants is gonna
direction
be what
Council too.
yes, it's gonna be very little direction from the council, though, I think, with the police chief. I would give the duties of the administrator the full duties. If you're going to have a professional administrator, let the chief do his job and let the mayor, let the administrator do the overall oversight of the position.
I agree with that entirely. I agree entirely. I think we run less. Are we gonna eliminate the possibility that we're gonna end up paying out, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars to former employees or whatever? No, we're not ever gonna eliminate that no matter what we do. But the lack of professionalism in both our executive and legislative branches has cost this village a lot of money. We have a better chance of mitigating that if the administrator runs the
Again, I
show.
think the whole point of all of our discussions have been about how this was professional. You said,
Yes. Yes.
Oh, we talked about it.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Let them do the job.
Let them do the job, that's exactly
Especially if
right.
this turns out to be a full-time position, we're probably gonna be able to attract somebody that knows what they're doing.
Exactly.
Instead of having somebody that's just got a personality of just, I don't, I live in the
Exactly.
village and I wanna control the police chief.
So what I'm hearing is there are people in favor of the administrator being the one to appoint, promote, remove, suspend, or otherwise discipline those in the police department subject to the provisions of this charter relating to village tenure, blah, blah, blah. Basically be in charge of the police department from a manager perspective.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing. Am I hearing anyone that disagrees?
I would like maybe to ask, Rick Eckler if there is any reason, just, I don't know, statute, just something that no, the police function of a municipality should be with an elected official. Just to see if, and
I mean, in general, the way it works in Ohio is that the municipalities maintain part of the home rule, body of law is that municipalities maintain control of the police power. And it's pretty vague beyond that, because the whole point is that municipalities get to define their own police powers.
And since the director or the administrator does report to the mayor in some way.
So that's my thing, I
There
guess
is
in my
still-
mind, I want it to be a pyramid, I want all of the workers to be reporting up to their supervisors, the supervisors report to the administrator, and the administrator needs to report to the mayor, the mayor is the one who's elected. If the people of the community have a problem with Officer Bob being a jerk face, they're probably gonna call the mayor to complain. And if the mayor has no ability whatsoever to engage in any kind of supervisory role, that's not okay.
Except that we've already established the mayor has supervisory power over the administrator. Right now, that would mean that that downward pressure in your pyramid is on the administrator to fix the police department, not for the mayor to fix the police
That's
department.
exactly right. I think,
Right, that's our goal there. Right?
So are we arguing about the same, are we arguing for the same position?
Yes.
yes,
I
yes,
think so.
we're saying the exact same
It's
thing.
just because the tone is that you're taking away as much as you possibly can from the mayor to the extent that you don't want the mayor to be able to issue an order regarding Officer Bob.
I don't want the
No,
mayor to
because-
be able to issue an order
Because they
to
need to
Officer
follow
Bob.
a chain of command and give that feedback to the administrator and let the administrator.
And that's
But-
fine.
But that doesn't mean,
We're all saying the same
Okay.
thing.
that
Alright.
does, but it also doesn't mean that the citizens can't call the mayor.
Because they
Right.
will.
And the mayor can say to the administrator, hey, this is the phone call I got, and we need to do something about it.
Perfect.
And obviously, I would hope at least that because of these other controls that we're putting in place, the mayor and the administrator are not gonna be on separate sides of the bedroom, never talking to each
Right,
other.
right.
One would assume that they'll be working together.
Right.
Sorry. I wonder if I can temporarily make it
It's back.
so that my battery
There we
doesn't care.
Okay, so we're all saying the same thing on that one. We want the administrator to have that power, obviously the mayor is the administrator's boss.
Any power,
Relate it back that way.
any power to give the administrator, the mayor has that exact same power, essentially.
But the intent here in finding those ways that the mayor talks to the administrator, not talks to Bob.
Yes.
But when it's gonna happen in this village, it's gonna be both of them.
Well, I mean, that's.
Yeah, that's
That's just what, that's the reality.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah, once we have an administrator, some people are gonna call the administrator, some people are gonna call the mayor, some people will still call council because they look at
Some people are just posted to Facebook.
No, most people are just gonna go to Facebook.
it. So,
And
all right,
not.
trying to stay on topic a little bit, we've expressed general approval of most of New Albany's, with the exception of Groveport's number 10.
If we go look at Groveport, it has some things here that sound really interesting. I just don't know if we want to put it in our charter. Number 3 in Groveport, to prepare and submit to the council on or before the first day of March of each year, complete report of the administrative activity. It's gotta be administrative.
I think that.
That is the administrator. No?
No.
No.
It's the mayor.
Where are you?
But in most of the
Report
charters
by
I've read, that
the-
is the 3 is the administrator, I believe. Anybody else?
Some of it might have been in conjunction
Yeah, that'll be an
together.
administrator job.
A lot of these things are.
I think the mayor will probably countersign it, but it would be the administrator that actually prepared that report.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so let's maybe jump over to the administrator. That seems to be what needs clarified more. And we can bounce back to the mayor.
Really quick, 1A, my recollection is that everybody, sorry, I'm back on the memo. Didn't we kind of all agree that the mayor does not retain veto power, or did we kick that can down the road? I don't remember.
We did not.
No,
No, no
no veto power.
Right, that's what I thought, I just wanted to double check.
No
So-
vote and no veto power, I think.
Yes.
Okay, so-
All right, number 2 then, how should administrative authority be allocated between the mayor and the administrator?
which is what we're gonna do now.
Groveport places departments of law and police under its mayor. And then the idea is that the administrator assists. Based on what we were just all talking about, isn't that kind of where everybody is as it is, so we could probably kind of follow Groveport?
No,
No,
No.
place that under the administrator.
The administrator, not the
The
mayor.
exact opposite of what that
I'm
says.
sorry, then I'm confused.
So road court says everything except law and police goes to the administrator. But for law and police, the mayor is the chief administrator.
But the mayor,
What we were saying here, Kelly, is that everything goes to the administrator with the understanding the administrator reports to the mayor. So the administrator does everything, the mayor is still their boss. So
Regarding the case.
regarding everything.
Everything.
Gotcha. So we don't need to spell out specifically.
Right, this
anything
road
about
court, road court specifically takes police out of that.
Is there a charter that does the opposite? So that I can look at it?
I think that, Kelly, I think it's possible that it's just simply not mentioned in some because. I mean,
And this is why Pam was right, we do need to talk to Bricker and Eckler about this, just to clarify. There may be a reason that this is, we're not seeing this in
yeah,
other charters.
yeah, because it is often that the mayor oversees the police. Even when there's an administrator that's senior.
City manager, we have.
And it also affects the idea of a more powerful or less powerful mayor. I mean,
Well, and we've had, I have heard from them.
All right, Soraya's looking at Pickerington, and Pickerington seems to be doing exactly what you guys are talking about. Pickerington, if you look at Pickerington, so Pickerington has a setup, this was a good catch from Soraya, because I did not look at Pickerington at all. Tascalington,
The task of, the task
or whatever it was that I said, there we go. All right, so
where is it?
So in Pickerington, when you look at mayor, or section 302 powers, manager supervision, the mayor shall supervise the city manager. The city manager will be responsible to the mayor. The mayor has the right to discipline the city manager. And then when you look at the city manager, they have everything.
And
They are the one
everything
who,
else.
they run everything and the mayor just
Yeah.
bosses the manager around.
Yes.
That's,
And I'm looking at the, that organizational chart in Johnstown,
Mhm.
and it looks like, well, actually, it's village council down at the village manager, but the manager is over the police.
So are we actually, now that we're looking at Tascala, is that what everybody in the room, is that the setup everyone feels comfortable with?
Tascala or Pickerington?
I'm sorry, I meant to say Pickering.
One of the key places.
Yeah, this is confusing.
It is.
I do like it, it's very, Pickerington's E, the manager supervision, it's pretty clear.
Yeah,
That was fine.
so
So are
then,
we being picky? Do we need to go the way Pickering did it?
that's what I'm asking,
Very
yes.
That was
Yeah.
great.
I'm getting good feelings from people about the way Pickerington's doing it. The only problem is, at least in Pickerington, the mayor is presiding over council meetings in addition to overseeing the manager.
Right, and
And
that's
they have a
not,
veto
and
and
that's
blah, blah, blah.
not the
Yeah,
case
that's
for
not
us.
the case.
And that's not the case for us.
But presiding over isn't necessarily a power, right? That just means you're calling it to order and,
Which we don't want.
which we don't, I mean, that's not really a,
What we've done so far in the drafting is that we've written in a requirement that the mayor attend council meetings,
Right.
but they have no actual power in that room.
President of council can
I have
do
a
all that.
question. If our mayor does not have veto power on ordinances, how are we providing an executive check on the legislative powers of council for ordinances that are completely off the wall?
You're right, we don't, and I thought about that,
I think that we
But-
need to have something.
but in the end, I don't necessarily disagree with you, Sarai, but I worry
So
that if we don't,
hang on a second, I have a suggestion.
Well, can she finish her?
No, no, no.
I have a suggestion.
First.
she was.
So I was getting there. So I think that if we were to have a provision for the mayor to make vetoes with comment to go back to council, So they can't just flat veto something. They could veto with comment back to council for council to revise.
So,
Normally, the provision is just the amount of council members allowed or necessary to override the veto.
so
So I mean, that's
So-
something to do.
Yeah.
can we go through the
Find that
Pinkerton powers of mayor? Because if it's as slim as it sounds, I personally don't believe I would actually have a problem if it's, boss around the administrator and veto as a check.
That's
Because
what,
I do believe that a check there is reasonable.
as scary as it sounds, I was thinking the same.
I do believe that
So,
it should be
let's go through Pickerington, all of Pickerington's powers of mayor, and then let's talk through
So
that.
in Pickerington, the mayor presides over council meetings, may introduce presides over council meetings
As a
currently
non-voting chair.
as a non-voting chairperson,
Mhm.
which 50% is not what we do currently in the current draft. He or she is present but does not vote, which is different from preside. The mayor does not open
Yeah.
council meetings the way we've got it currently written, but whatever. The mayor can introduce ordinances or resolutions, which is how we've currently got it drafted. Any elected person and the administrator may introduce legislation.
Ordinances now.
Well, yeah, so introducing just means you brought it to the table.
I would like for the council to consider this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
piece of
that's,
And,
yeah.
and quite honestly, I would even say that a resident can bring
Yeah,
legislation
And they
to the
do,
table.
and they do. Yeah,
Hell, I drafted a piece of legislation as a resident once here, so it's,
Pataskala,
they have.
next is veto, and there's
Pickerington.
Pickerington allows for the mayor to have a veto and a very long paragraph controlling how that happens.
and then,
The mayor has judicial powers, which we've already discussed, and the mayor has that really nice catch-all of supervising the city manager, so it creates that nice pyramid that I was talking about. And then for other duties, official ceremonial,
Resolution.
and primary liaison, the mayor is the primary liaison between the city and all other political,
The mayor or designee,
or designee.
which I
I like that.
I like that.
I personally, well, so here's the thing, right? So in your pipe fitter scenario, I would hope, though we cannot guarantee, that if that person
I love
doesn't.
pipe fitters, by the way.
Yeah, no, they're great, and I.
Could be.
I'm not picking on pipe, I love pipe fitters, I come from family. Pipe fitters and electricians, I love them.
If I could go back and talk to 22-year-old me, I would have told him to go be a pipe.
I would have told me to go be a
18
pipe
will get
fitter.
her told to go be an electrician.
Or,
Alright,
okay, that too, but I would hope that that person would then be able to go to the professional and say, you know what? This isn't my wheelhouse, this is your wheelhouse, right? That is the best we can hope for. And if they're not, and we
And
find
this
that we
is-
have a mayor
and
who
this
is
is-
a blowhard, then we have recall.
And this is why we shouldn't do it, because the likelihood of that scenario happening again and again and again is very high, and that's why I want the administrator to have that responsibility.
I disagree.
I think you're changing the whole, if you add the veto power in here, you've made it a strong, mayor.
Yeah, you have.
Made it strong mayor.
Well,
You've gone completely, and then what's the other, the recourse to the mayor? So basically the mayor would have power to only pass ordinances that they want passed. Because she can veto or he can veto.
I'm sure that the veto has an overcome.
It does.
There
All right, so
then
the way it
there's a
works
check
in-
with the council.
Let's let Kelly read this paragraph.
The way it works
Does
in,
veto, I have a question. Does vetoes only work if something has been passed?
yes,
So if it dies, she can't veto, he or she can't veto.
No,
If it dies, yeah.
Let's read the veto.
so every council ordinance or resolution shall be presented to the mayor for consideration, except as otherwise provided. The mayor may approve or veto the whole of any ordinance or resolution. So there is no line item veto in
That's fine.
Pickerington.
Wherever the heck this is.
Unless an ordinance or resolution is returned to the city clerk, either signed or with written notice of veto within 3 days after submission, it shall take effect as though the mayor had signed it and approved the same. So you can't, put it in the drawer. The city clerk, upon receiving notice of the veto, shall within 24 hours after receiving notice, notify each council member in writing of the veto. Failure to serve notice to any council member shall not affect the validity of the veto or council's right to override the same. When the mayor has vetoed an ordinance, council may, at the next regular or special meeting, reconsider it, and if such legislation shall then be approved by the affirmative vote of, in our case, 6 council members, it shall become effective notwithstanding the mayor's veto. So basically, a regular piece of legislation that would pass with a majority vote, meaning 5?
No, 4.
4. So if 4 members of council vote, if we were to do this, 4 members of council vote on a regular piece of legislation and it passes, the mayor can veto it within 3 days. It then gets kicked back. The council can have a special meeting if they don't want to wait for the next regular meeting. And if 6 members of council say, no, we really want this to happen, then it would still happen.
6.
So
But that's a strong.
I want to address something with you. It is possible that the building scenario could have unfolded completely differently. I had multiple conversations with our current mayor about this, okay? And I can tell you that her willingness to support ramming the building down people's throats was like that much over the, okay, let's do this. It's possible in the future that 4 or 5 members of council could try to ram something down people's throats. And the only recourse we have in the end is the mayor's veto. If there are 4 or 5 people, we have 7-member council, and they are fighting bitterly over what the right thing to do is. The mayor, giving the mayor veto power, that might be the only thing that saves us in the end. And the council, because it's such a bitterly disputed thing, could never come back and say, we have enough votes now to override your veto. It can, I want you to remember, it can work both ways. It's not necessarily a terrible thing, but I also
I also want to point out, I was making it a point to use the word regular a lot as I was going through that paragraph, because keep in mind, anytime we engage in anything other than the regular process, right? If we're waiving the 3 readings, if we're passing something with immediacy, you're gonna be looking at 6 people agreeing anyway. So if 6 people are agreeing, then 6 people can override a veto.
Yes, I would like to interject that we're going to include a phrase that paves the right initiative and referendum.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, you're
And
absolutely
so
right.
at the very worst,
You're right.
we just repeat.
You're absolutely right.
At this point, does anyone in the room not want the mayor to have a veto?
I'm gonna,
Question.
I'll go along with it because in all the years that I was on council or been going to council, I've never noticed an opportunity for the mayor to veto. Now, it got close, I would think.
It got really
But,
close.
so I think we can have it there, knowing that it's probably not gonna be used that many times.
So given that this is a Sunday morning, how everyone can attend. We want to revisit the veto question in our Thursday meeting this week.
I think.
Well,
You
Well,
can-
remember,
Well, we do
yeah,
anyway,
I
we
will
go
not
over the
be,
draft.
I won't be able to have the draft ready until next week,
Thursday.
not this Thursday, the following Thursday.
Okay, so do we want to table that till when everybody's available?
My only question though is, in terms of drafting over the next 2 weeks, do you guys want me to use Pickerington's as a model or not?
Use it as a model and read out what we still need to hash out. Because the other thing is I actually do think we should probably all sit on this. I mean, I'm on the fence enough on a veto that I could come back around in 2 weeks and say, no, I thought about it long and hard and I don't want the mayor to have a veto.
I'm in the same place as Brian. If we're taking away the mayor's direct authority over individual people,
Yeah.
then they've got to have.
But we're not, I think, no,
I'm taking my authority away from you.
I think what we've done, in this model, what we've done is we've sliced down the mayor's job to supervising legislation, right, to make sure it's not off the rails, and they supervise the administrator. Right, that's what they do, because the mayor will not be able to go directly to Officer Joe and say, Officer Joe, you're doing this wrong. The mayor will have to go to the administrator.
Or anyone else.
And all judicial stuff, I will point out, the administrator is not an elected official, you cannot do any
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the
mayor's court, right, so that's the three things that you left, and that I know about.
So you're saying the administrator can go to Officer Joe now?
You don't have to.
You're saying if you had an administrator.
Yeah.
then you-
Yeah.
Then the mayor could too.
No, I think,
No.
no, I think you should go to the police.
Mr. Chairman.
Remember, we have
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
departments and have department heads.
I would expect a professional administrator not to go to Officer Joe. I would expect them to go to their manager.
Right.
But in an extreme situation or in a moment of exigence or whatever you have it, that's how that power would flow. It wouldn't go mayor
Keep in
to.
mind too, that we're gonna have administrative rules in an administrative article under this charter. We can designate a chain of command that the mayor or administrator or council, all three have to follow in dealing with situations like that where Officer Bob has screwed up and it will list in the agency, in the administrative rules, the chain of authority is chief of police, then administrator, then mayor.
That would, if we had that in writing, yes, but as it stands now, there's an org chart and the mayor's on the top of the org chart.
I agree.
Anybody the mayor wants to talk to, she'll talk to.
So let's move.
All right, so really quickly on C, veto power, the only thing that I have a concern with is it says 3 days. I think it should say 3 business days.
Right.
In part because, mayor could be out of town over the weekend, the mayor could end up in the hospital, something like that. I think there should also be a provision of, if the mayor's in the hospital.
I think passing it on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, so that you have 3 days that weren't business days, personal days, so
Well,
it's more, I think business days is fine.
okay, well,
Yeah.
here's the thing though, that's actually how this is done, right? This gives council a sneak around. And politically, this, when you pass something, when you know someone is gonna be out of town, this is a thing that has happened repeatedly throughout American history, and I actually don't necessarily think that it's always had.
Gee whiz.
What was that?
That's a state club.
Anyway.
Oh, everywhere.
I don't care.
That's nothing wrong.
Yeah, well, I have this strong feeling. So my only concern here is, how does veto work with, not to use the emergency word, but, immediate legislation? Are those veto proof because they go into effect immediately?
They're veto proof by function,
I guess they already
have
have
6 votes.
Yeah,
fair enough.
so let's go back, we're going, I think a little too far down that path for not having made a decision whether or not to put on their veto, or not going to make it today. Okay, let's leave that path to walk through today.
But it is basically all of us are sort of on the same page that are here.
That's-
So I'm with Ray, I'm gonna wrap something up and we will argue all over again.
Yay!
Alright, so I'm gonna use Harrington and circle the word.
You're doing great.
To interpret.
And the Pinkerton also says compensation, it does address it in there, it says council shall establish the salary of the mayor by ordinance, shall not be changed during the term of office, non-monetary benefits, including but not limited to health insurance, shall not be considered compensation. So it addresses it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't define it.
Right,
I like that.
I do too.
yeah, that's fine.
Cool.
What does it mean to not be considered compensation?
So they're,
So you can't say that you pay your mayor 50,000, but you're counting the benefits.
Right.
Well, I think what it's meaning is you can't change it, so if their health insurance benefits change mid-year, you can change it. 'Cause-
Yeah, like
It
that's
doesn't
what-
cause their salary to go down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also perhaps.
Well, yeah, because like health benefits, like they change constantly throughout the year and all of that. And
alright, I'm gonna jump to question 3 in the memo. which is, I think, already answered. Is it necessary for charter to specify that the mayor is not required to be a full-time position, mayor may hold other employment? I'm getting the sense that we want to leave that up to the village on an ongoing basis, so we're gonna not specify.
Say that one more time?
Are we gonna say it's full-time or part-time?
No.
No.
But I think what we had talked about was not that it is not necessarily full-time.
That's the same thing
Right,
as
so
not
is it
specified.
necessary for the charter to specify that the mayor is not required to be a full-time position?
Yeah, so,
That is a yes.
so by
I
putting it-
understand that.
Yeah, so by putting it in the charter is not necessarily full-time,
It allows
It allows them to hold a second job.
I feel it's smarter in that.
So saying
Just
mayor
specify.
need not be a full-time official.
And that person may get other employment.
And then you have employment.
Which I think the, New Albany one did that pretty well. I don't think
Don't.
I'm writing down all look at it, you're not talking about. We've already answered number 4, which is allowing the mayor to introduce legislation. Length of, are we just
And the
keeping,
answer's no, right?
what? Yes.
Because anybody knows this legislation.
Oh, yeah, okay, sorry.
Number 5, should the mayor be subject to the same length of residency requirement as members of the council, or should it be longer? I was saying, anyone think differently?
I think it should be a year instead of 6 months. The mayor needs to have a better
Agreed.
understanding of the community, I
What
think,
if there's
than a
somebody
council.
really good though, who's
Yeah, I don't know. if
been here less than a year?
I think you're limiting yourself for no.
I want there to be
What do you know?
some indication, I feel like we came up with 6 months as making us happy, and I don't really, at the end of the day, it's an elected official, they represent the community regardless of what the office is.
So I feel like, a whole lot of the discussion around having the mayor at all is that this is a person who knows and represents the community. I feel like if we don't, if it's only 6 months, I don't think that we are representing that.
Well, they're gonna win the election if people didn't think they represented them, right?
Oh,
If you can get it elected, you're only there for 6 months, and you've done your work.
If you're the only one who puts in a petition, then
Well, then in that
you're
case, you're the only one running, and my golly, because somebody's not here, how long you lived here?
But should that person, right? This is our opportunity, to say, should that person be able to put in, would we be in a better situation having a stranger running the show, which,
I mean, sometimes
or
yes.
no one running the show?
Yeah, sometimes yes.
I don't know. Well, I'm just making sure we're having the conversation.
Right.
I agree with Brian, I do. I mean, I could keep it the same, but I just think that. yeah.
Well, I guess I need an answer, how do we want to resolve this?
Consistency is good, but I think a year is more in keeping with the spirit of the previous conversation.
What do the quiet people think?
No, what does Nina think of that?
I think that, as long as we don't hinder somebody who's potentially good, is interested.
What was our wording for council? Because
Why
it
do
was
we
something
even-
more, it was something
As
about,
long as they're a member. of the-
6 months as a qualified elector.
okay.
At all.
I think 6 months is fine, because really, what are you gonna learn in an extra 6 months? I mean, let's be realistic. I think
I agree
pool
with
would
you.
be bigger.
And is it at the time they take office or at the time they file their?
At the time they file their petition,
Okay. So by the time they take office, they'll be a little bit more.
probably close to a year.
Okay, I'll tell you what I think, you have to have a hell of a big personality after 6 months to engage enough people to vote for you, even getting 5 votes. I mean, honestly, I don't.
Well, that was my kind of my point.
It's like,
You've done your
okay,
work if you, especially if you're.
there's a real safeguard there in terms of, balance.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I see where you're coming from, I absolutely do.
I'm just making sure that we understand the spirit of the previous discussion and that it has been considered here.
Well, I don't understand that you're a provocateur.
I don't.
And I love that, but there's times when it's not helpful. And truer words have never been spoken. Fail! Fail!
Yes.
Yes.
President of council or what?
Well, president of council is who does the job if the mayor, while there is no mayor.
So New Albany says, in the event of a temporary absence, both the mayor and president pro tem. So the president pro tem takes over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then after
And then
that.
after that, who's your third person?
And then,
But what's the
okay,
procedure for,
if two or more council members have held the same length of continuous elected service within the village, then an acting mayor shall be chosen among those two or more council members by a vote of 4 council members.
it's a 4-year term, right? You don't want, so I guess in New Albany,
This is talking about a temporary absence.
Yes.
Yeah,
right. Well, no, I don't think it is. I think in New Albany, the way it works is if, let's say, the mayor gets elected, 6 months later, the mayor dies. I think what happens is president or the president pro tem
I think that's
gets
exactly.
the job for 3.5 years until there's another election.
no, they both very explicitly say during the temporary absence or disability.
Yes, and Grove
Very
Board says
specific.
vacancy succession. So it's addressing.
So how do you define, I think that situation, didn't the mayor miss some meetings because of a broken code?
Yeah.
So did somebody take over as mayor? No. Is it necessary?
It's
Was that-
temporary.
Well, just because she's missing meetings,
Well, what is it?
council meetings, doesn't mean that she's unable
Well, that's what I'm getting at. What do you mean by unable to perform? If she's in the hospital for a week, does that mean we need to have a mayor?
Well, if she's in the hospital for a week,
I don't know if it levels things out. Because how do we define this now? What happens now? Sorry.
Grove Court, section 5.04, vacancy succession.
Yes.
Whenever a vacancy shall occur in office of mayor, as determined by the adoption of a motion to determine vacancy by the majority vote of the council, the person serving as president pro tem of the council shall have 5 days after the adoption of the motion to accept and qualify as the mayor, or to notify the clerk of council that he or she rejects succession to the office of mayor. If the person holding the office of president pro tem rejects succession to the office of mayor, the council shall elect by a majority vote a qualified person. All right, hang on, moving forward. The president pro tem or the person elected by the council shall serve as mayor until January 1 following the next regular municipal election.
at which there will be the mayoral election.
Yeah.
Okay.
If at the time the vacancy is determined more than 2 years remain in the term of office and fewer than 50 days remain prior to the regular municipal election, the person who succeeds the office of the mayor or the person elected by council shall serve the remainder of the unexpired term. So
Because you can't really get in a,
So what's the difference between the temporary? I mean, one talks about temporary, and the other talks about.
Because one breaks her foot and she's out for 6 weeks, and the other one dies.
Here's what I'm.
So we talk about both of them.
Here's what I'm getting at, I'm trying to forget what I normally talk about. What if the mayor is incapacitated? Under anesthesia, and then we have this is that one you should know.
Look, I'm not getting into 25th Amendment
No,
territory.
I'm talking about what if somebody declares themselves the mayor?
I do not have control of the village office.
I'm just saying, that's a possibility. You take it, whoever the president of council is, I'm the mayor now because of the incapacity of the current mayor, and I'm going to pass this legislation.
I actually don't think that that's an
That's not-
unreasonable thing to ask because of what,
Well, it was very vague when it says temporary and what duties. To me, it should just be BAU. Run this ship until the mayor comes back, until there's a
Well,
vacancy.
I like the fact that they have a motion that's determined.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I can't say, the majority vote of the council says that yes, they're incapacitated long enough, we need to do something about it. Whether that be, hey, they're out for 6 weeks, but we've got this major thing coming up, and we need someone, versus they're dead, they're not coming back. So, I mean, that's determined by council, right? What that temporary nature looks like versus the current reality of what we need a mayor for.
Because you give the mayor then all the power to sign contracts, so you have the administrator report to them, even if it's for a week. That's a lot of power for someone to have for a week.
But the whole council voted on it, and agrees to it.
Well, if you got the council on one side and the mayor and the.
It
Because
could
he needs the
totally,
administrator.
it absolutely goes sideways, but what about the situations where it's not a
Well, that's what I
hospital?
was asking, what happens now?
I don't
Well, nothing happens now. Literally, nothing happens
You're
now.
just a boy?
Well,
Yeah, there's just a.
So here, we have
Unless she dies in office, or is.
Hold on.
Incapacitated stroke.
Or incapacitated with a stroke.
well, no, I was just gonna say that the president of council at least run the meetings. And didn't we say that the mayor was gonna run the meetings?
No.
We didn't, okay.
The president pro tem is supposed to run the meetings, I remember that, but I'm trying to remember what other duties we gave to the president pro tem as part of council.
Well, then, that they would
Just
be,
They step in for the mayor, if the president, yeah, the president just steps in for the mayor if the mayor is unavailable.
Okay.
And that's, and so that are council meetings, that's really.
so maybe we just say that. The president of council steps in for the mayor if the mayor's unavailable.
Well, we've already got that.
Well, period.
Yeah.
It
So
doesn't
this was
matter
the really
whether
what we
it's
just
a
needed
long
is-
absence or a 2-hour absence.
Well, so if that's the case, then what we really just need is road court's actual vacancy and succession rule, i.e. the mayor is gone.
Well, then you kind of have to do it, I mean, I know like, if the president now goes under anesthesia, then the vice president temporarily for a couple hours is the president. It's just the way they sign the little thing, and it happens, it's just the way it is. I don't know, we need to take it to that.
Right.
But you have to think about, what do you mean by being incapacitated? They just, if you're in the hospital, are you signing contracts, are you hospital bed? Or is it just the amount of time that you are under anesthesia and you can't fulfill your duties?
Well,
I mean, I
the
don't
way-
know.
This is a big governmental, this is a big issue and question at every level of government, right? Because you can get into the weeds so easily in this question, because it's like, okay, how do you determine, how does it become official that the mayor is incapacitated? If you make it a council vote, then you can absolutely have a legislative body that decides, yeah, the president's off his rocker,
right.
right? But if you have nothing, then you can absolutely end up with a situation where the mayor has dementia and is for all intents and purposes legally incapacitated,
Yeah.
but
And the mayor has,
there's nothing that can be done because there's no provision for it.
the mayor has to come to council meetings.
So what if they have dementia?
No, they don't have to.
Well, that, I think,
That's a real line, right?
I think that we just need more, maybe some
These are
specified
legal.
time limits.
These are terms.
Can you put up New Albany's, just without the president pro tem?
So, while he's scrolling, I just want to take about a level too. Are we right now trying to determine whether we want to include language on this matter or not? Or we
Yes.
all agree that we want to include language, and we are discussing what we want that language to be?
We all agree that we need language, we're trying to figure out what the
I
language
think
should
we
be.
need our attorney.
So here's what, New Albany, up, down a little bit now. No, I don't know what's up.
Paul, why do you think we need to be
Right there.
Well, I don't know, maybe they've run across this.
This is
before.
just
It's
concise.
something-
You just want to run it by them to see.
But they're gonna be here Thursday.
Yeah.
They are not, they're, at this point, Rainey and I have basically told Paul that we will let him know when we specifically meet him at a meeting.
Okay.
It's probably good for budgetary reasons.
That was,
Because
we
it's all
did get that
right.
email.
Yes.
And
For that
we're running out of money.
For that reason, we've said, you know, at this point, we are going to,
We're halfway through that.
we are going to,
They've been coming to a lot of stuff and writing lots of memos.
so we're at this point going to email questions en masse through Kelly.
I know,
You can't
this
do
is
this
why we want to get.
All right, hold on. So what we've decided is we are going to email questions through Kelly as the main focal point, because he's the drafter. So we have questions Kelly needs to know about. And other than that, if we need Paul to come to meetings, we'll ask him to do so. We are pushing the budget, so we need to only engage him as needed, not come to every meeting and answer maybe 2 questions.
So you're going to ask him, Kelly, whether you can use.
How much does that cost, asking a question?
We can't,
How long does it
Depends, does it take them 20 minutes? If it takes them 20 minutes, then that's like 23.
Answering
So
the
that's,
question through email.
like $60, $80.
So what's every meeting, is he attends, is it like $500? So for every meeting, it's like 250 an hour? Yeah. So $500 an hour.
It's $250 an hour.
$50 an hour, that's a lot of money for every meeting.
And Paul, are we paying Eric that for budget? to?
No, we are not.
Supposedly not.
I'm just curious.
We are
I
not.
For
wasn't-
clarification, no, we are not.
That better not be a lie either, because.
So just to put it in context, you have that hourly rate, but sometimes it's hard for people to conceptualize that hourly rate in actual work terms.
Right,
Every 6 minutes that passes that Paul is on the clock, we have paid him $25.
okay. So you want to ask him,
I make more.
then if,
And what am I asking him?
I was just curious, if that's what the scene tomorrow, wrote the board budget one. For a music, like, this one is a musician from, I'm not sure which one you have.
This
on
is New Albany, where I
screen.
currently got up.
Is a little more relaxed and would work too, so is that something you're gonna ask him or have me?
I can tell you right now that if I say which one's better, his response is gonna be whichever one you guys pick.
Well, here's the thing, too.
Okay.
Legally
okay,
speaking, both of them are completely valid.
Okay,
We could just leave it like this and let them all figure it out, because if you can get into the weeds so much with this. That we can never figure out every single scenario. And at some point, you need to let adults figure stuff out.
Well,
I
okay.
don't know at what point, we're not this is a small village, work, I mean,
Have we
I
don't know.
identified a definition for what the president pro tem does? I mean, because that's all this is.
Well,
What we have written is that literally they have no special powers within the council itself, like they don't have their
The
own
president pro tem,
tiebreaker vote. Yeah, the president pro tem doesn't, like, they're not a tiebreaker vote, they don't get to dictate what subjects may be discussed, anything like that. Literally, their designation is, this is the person who steps in when the mayor breaks their foot and can't do their job.
so does that person kind of taken themselves out of council at that point?
Yeah. As far as I know, we haven't.
That's what kind of dangerous
Yeah,
too,
not
because
that
that's kind of an executive person that is also a part of council doing all of these functions. If they indeed do have contractual signing authority and introducing ordinances, you could, granted, you've got your 30 days, whatever, but who knows what can happen.
Just in case it's on anyone's head, we can't have the administrator do it.
Yeah.
oh, no, I know. I am wondering, so here's the thing, and the reason, I actually think we do need to specify, and the reason is because we did go through this with the council member. I don't think it's unreasonable to assume that we will at some point go through this with the mayor. I mean, nobody, under 50 has run for mayor since maybe the first time Lynn ran for mayor. She may have been under 50 when she ran the very first time. And since then, it's been, and all of the elections where she has been elected, it's been, 3 candidates, none of them, except maybe Lynn the first time, was under 50 years old. And we actually had the scenario with a council member who was unwilling to show up to council meetings, and literally nothing happened because we had nothing in place. And that
And that person never
seriously,
resigned.
and that person never resigned, and that seriously slowed down the legislative process. It caused a lot of problems. It caused a lot of
Well,
problems.
also, what we're doing with the having 5 members or 6 members, local council,
Right,
it's the same thing could happen now with the charter.
yes,
Because we've made it such that it's not a majority of people showing up, it's an actual number.
an actual
So that
number,
can happen with that as well.
yes.
That's one thing I'm worried about. I mean, I like the idea in principle, but things can happen with that very scenario. Some doesn't show up.
So we do need to define this. The question is how to do so, and how granular to do so.
Yeah.
So, but,
In the
Kelly's
interest,
right, though, we have already talked about what the president of council does and that there's a vice president pro tem
and the vice president's only role is to step in if the president.
during the temporary absence or disability of the mayor. So the temporary stuff is sort of taken care of. It's
It is,
I don't
It's just the
know.
long-term stuff.
all right, guys,
it's long-term stuff.
I am going to email Paul. What I would like to do is kind of put a pin in this. I'm going to email with Paul and see if there is language that exists out there, maybe outside of the sample charters that he's looked at, on how to deal with this. it's, like I said, this is a very, very thorny issue at all levels of government. We are far from the first, nor shall we be the last group of people that has to wrestle with this, because there's so many sand pits trying to navigate it.
Look, I'll do some of this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try. I'm gonna try to find some language that I feel like will fit with what people have been talking about, but at the end of the day, you either leave it really vague, and then, as Paul said, trust people to be adults, or you get specific, and then at the moment you get specific, there are so many avenues for abuse, so many avenues for, oh, well, this situation came up and it's not exactly dealt with in this very
Well,
specific thing.
Okay, so I'm okay with leaving it vague, but we were rather specific with council. We were rather specific concerning that.
There was a specific list of things for which a council person has considered to forfeit, what shall be found to have forfeited their seat.
I'd like to point out that in all this memo, most of these things Paul has posed us as questions to make decisions. This particular one simply states provisions regarding the appointment of an acting mayor need to be included. It's not a question.
And we've done that.
Yeah.
You
The
know,
question is when to engage that.
what is my language for, a council person to be considered to have forfeited?
Well, I don't think it would apply, right? The mayor is different than the council person. The mayor can't.
Well, that's what
Right,
I'll look and see.
He just wants to see what his language was.
Resignation, forfeiture, office, a member of council may be forfeited upon a determination, convicted of a felony, crime regarding government duty, breach of public trust, lax.
Why can't we use?
We can
this?
absolutely, why don't we just mirror this?
Yeah,
Because it also includes a hearing process, like, so there's a check and balance
Exactly.
written into it. Guys, are you okay with me just mirroring this for the mayor?
Let's see what it looks
Alright.
Does that deal with our temporary issue then?
Well, yeah, so what would happen is, while this is going, what I would do is add a little bit to say that while this process is being carried out, while we are doing the public hearing and setting up a judge and blah, 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 that's when president of council would move out of their council role and into the temporary mayor position.
So we have that stuff, and they're not considered an elected official, but they're taking the role of an elected official.
They are the elected official.
They are.
Well, they are elected, moving to the mayor though.
So look, here's the other part of this, you guys. If something happens to where the mayor is going through a public hearing process to determine whether they have forfeited their position, the regular business of the village is not going to be carried out in terms of like legislators. It's not like you have to worry about, well, what about all this legislation that might not get passed for the next week and a half while we do this public hearing? We're going to deal with the mayor first and foremost. It's not like that's a situation that can continue for months on end. They're going to have to deal with it right away. So it would be a very short process, I would think.
I guess what I was most worried.
Shall we specify how short?
I think I'm lost.
I'm sorry. Let's do this. Let's put a pin in this. I'm gonna come up with some language.
Where are we giving the mayor position for the Howard Sign? Like, I
Well, the
don't
mayor
have.
has that.
I understand, where do they have it?
We don't have a guy. I don't think that, I know what we're solving. Are we solving, hold on, let me ask, because I need to put it in my words. So I see like 3 scenarios, right? The mayor's going on a 2-week cruise and won't have the ability to do what they need to do, right? The mayor is, has collapsed and is in a coma in the hospital, right? And the mayor is dead, right? Those are the 3 scenarios in which we need an acting mayor until a permanent solution or the next step has been called, has been dealt with. We already have a solution for the mayor's dead, right?
Yeah.
I feel like we need a solution for the mayor. We know the mayor will be out of contact for some short-term period of time. And I feel like we need, right, and then,
And we have that.
and we have that?
Yeah, because the president council shall serve as president and serve as the mayor during the temporary absence, 2-week cruise, or disability.
Okay, so what we need is the trigger for that. That's what I don't hear.
That's a good point.
That's what we need. If we have that,
And that's what I've been getting, that's really what I've been talking about with, that can get real thorny real quick.
right.
Because if council decides that they don't like what the mayor is doing about something, they could hold a freaking vote that says, well, mayor's incapacitated, they're clearly a crazy person.
Well, set the bar at 6, and if you can get 6 council people to agree that the mayor is 6 out of 7 is a high bar.
It's really, to me, the one that's part of the realistic is if the mayor's out of the country for 2 weeks or a month, whatever, well, you've got to have that,
Right.
you can't go that long.
Well,
So in that,
I think that if the mayor is taking a vacation, which is totally reasonable, they're gonna sit down and have a conversation with the president of council
And the
and
administrator.
the administrator and be like, okay, these are the things that I see needing to be done over the next 2 weeks while I'm gone. How do you guys want to split up those tasks?
And that's done. I'm not as worried about the
Sure.
vacation, I'm more worried about having a stroke.
so we need language that says, to trigger the temporary mayorship of the president pro tem, right? The mayor notifies council in writing so many days before a known absence to trigger that, right?
One thing,
In any state of an emergency situation, the mayor is, immediately incapacitated, right? Then council votes, with a number of whatever to engage the clause, and I think that's all we really need is what triggers the existing language.
I agree with him, and I think the route you're going is actually too far in the weeds. That's more of a friendly recall about how to kick the mayor out if we think so. The mayor has to.
Here's the only problem with the vacation, the only point I was trying to get at is, if you go on vacation and somebody actually becomes the mayor for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whatever, and they have the powers of the mayor, you can have a nefarious situation where somebody comes in and says, I'm going to get this stuff passed, I'm going to sign a contract if we choose that in the language, and when the mayor comes back, too bad, I'm the mayor for 3 weeks, and so.
You absolutely can, and that goes back to trusting the adults and being able to, if
Yeah.
somebody pulls
Which we
craziness, we
absolutely
can
cannot.
absolutely reference it.
Which we absolutely cannot. I think that nefarious situation he
A
just
referendum
said
is not easy.
can absolutely, and
I gotta be honest and
it's
say,
probable,
I'm
not
with
possible.
Sarai. I don't like the idea of, well, the mayor's on a 1-week cruise, so during that 1 week, the president of council is also the mayor. If the mayor is on the 1-week cruise, then the mayor has planned that at least a couple months in advance. They need to just be delegating tasks for that week, and then we all move on with our lives.
So what if the mayor is out and president of council becomes acting mayor? And then you define what things an acting mayor can or cannot do. Maybe an acting mayor cannot do every.
Cannot
I thought about that, but then when we get in a situation where there's an actual emergency where things need to happen, what happens?
Well, I would like to think that the council people that I elected aren't sitting around rubbing their hands waiting for.
Yes.
I would hope
I think that's a
that
lovely thought, but not necessarily true.
All right, I'm gonna ask for Mr. Starbuck here, who has been trying to contribute, again, I can't see him, what his input is, and then we're gonna table this and move on, because we've gotta make it through a lot more, and we're running out of time.
The intention is to write this for the next 50 to 100 years. What it means to be absent has changed dramatically over the last 10 to 20. If the mayor goes on a cruise, right now, the mayor has access to her email, the mayor has access to a phone, the mayor has access to all of the delegated responsibility that the mayor has already given to staff. And this will only be expanded by having an administrator in there. I think that the 2-week cruise, the dangers involved in the 2-week cruise option are somewhat overstated.
So,
I think that the dementia issue is a real issue that really needs to be addressed. And to that, I would say 6 members of council already have the ability to act unilaterally. And 6 members of council already have the ability to act unilaterally in terms of overriding the veto. 6 members of council, theoretically is therefore an appropriate threshold to remove a mayor, since there needs to be some provision, dangerous as that obviously is.
Okay, so I just want to say one thing and then you can table it, and that is, as much as I have complained about the mayor, if she were in this room right now, she would tell you that in the amount of time that she has been mayor, she's taken 1, maybe 2 vacations because of a fear of exactly what the scenario you just put together. She will tell you, she specifically, I mean, literally, I think for 12 years, she took 1 vacation.
I'm sorry, she is so.
1 vacation. I don't necessarily.
All right.
All right, and we're tabling it. Next.
All right, 7 is what powers will be delegated to the administrator. I feel like we're already we've already answered that with Picker. We've already talked about administrator having the same ability to introduce proposed legislation. That's already been dealt with in the previous article. Number 8, who has the power to appoint the administrator? We've answered that already with the Pickerington, that's the mayor. With council approval, just majority, not supermajority. So.
Who supervises the administrator, I think we've knocked that one.
Yeah, mayor.
Should any residential requirements apply to the administrator?
No. Everybody's saying no.
Should the charter contain any explicit limitation on the ability of council and its members to intervene in the administrative authority granted to the administrator? Before you answer that, just 2 sub-questions. Should the same standard apply to both council and the mayor? The answer to that question may depend on how much oversight authority is granted to the mayor. And then he cites some examples of Pascagoula and Pickerington.
What's going on? Oh, I'm sorry.
There's questions on there.
So this goes back to Officer Bob's being a crazy person and somebody calls the mayor or somebody calls the council person, defining that chain of.
Based on what we've agreed to so far, the answer has to be no. Because otherwise the water is just as muddy as it is right now.
The question is, should the charter contain any explicit limitation on the ability of council
Oh,
members to intervene?
Sorry, I answered in the negative. Yeah, the answer is yes. I'm sorry, the answer, I was answering the question, should the council be able to intervene? And the answer is no.
Right.
Now, how we do that, Mr. Raptor, is.
Yeah.
Okay. We will look at what you, of course, on that one. All right, any questions on number 11? All right, number 12, who should be making, hold on, what are we saying? Who should be making the initial appointment of an acting administrator during a temporary absence of the administrator? Should the administrator have the authority, subject to the ability of council, to contravene an appointment? Depending on who appoints the administrator in the first place, does the mayor have a role in appointing an acting administrator? There are some good examples in the other charters presented, but it is a good question. So the administrator goes on a cruise, has a stroke, or dies. That needs rest.
Is the question, does the administrator appoint their own temporary person or make the mayor?
Or what's the process?
Here's the thing, we've talked about the mayor is hiring the administrator. If the administrator is going on a vacation for 2 weeks, I think the mayor will survive without them for 2 weeks. I think that will be fine. Now, the administrator keels over, has a heart attack, isn't coming in again, the mayor needs to just.
Hire a new one.
Hire a new
This is a, I don't know why we need this.
So, because in
So-
the meantime, the things that the administrator does.
It falls to the mayor.
Well,
Yeah.
that's all we're saying. Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, okay.
That,
Well, and what's that time? I mean, they have a heart attack, they're gonna come back in 6 weeks, is the mayor left out for 6 weeks?
That's up to the
6
mayor.
months, I mean.
Yeah, so-
That's up to the mayor. If the mayor wants to say, hey, I can make it for 6 weeks, then the mayor gets to say that.
Yeah.
If the mayor goes, oh God, I can't handle all of this, the mayor goes to council and initiates a new appointment. And
Or they come to
and-
council and they say, hey, can I get in touch with a temp agency and just get like a secretary in here for like the next 6
Yeah,
months?
So
I don't
like
think-
mayor's discretion all the way around.
I think that's the best way to handle it. Keep
I
it
think
simple.
that we consider the commissioner.
We have all of these people that can do the different things.
So, hold on. I don't think that it is a matter of whether or not the mayor can do those things. I think that the point of this is that it needs to be stated explicitly that they are taking a temporary, someone is taking a temporary appointment of administrator.
It doesn't fine.
Right, so if the mayor doesn't feel they can take on the duties for that period of time, they have the ability to appoint a temporary administrator.
And what I'm saying is, I don't see why we need to have that. We should just have an administrator. If the administrator leaves or becomes incapacitated or whatever, then the mayor and the council make a decision jointly, just like they would when we hired the very first administrator. They can either wait or they can choose not to wait.
That would be fine.
I don't think so. I think we need to give mayor and council that
What
flexibility.
happens if, it's a person that's in the military and they are in the reserves and they're called up? Does that person lose their job and get it back, or?
That's a whole- that's a whole different-
So the short answer is, and forgive my bluntness, if we are foolish enough to hire a military member as our administrator, and they get called up on deployment, then we have to hold that job open.
Yes.
And when they get back, they get their
But
job.
we could in the meantime hire an acting
We can have
administrator.
10.
We could have an acting administrator.
Here's what I'm saying, that we have agreed on a list of things that will be the administrator's duty. If we don't have an administrator, because if we functionally don't have an administrator, we need language that says that those duties that we have named to go to an administrator go somewhere else.
Yeah.
It seems to me they would go up to the mayor.
But that's not explicit in that you are.
You just
My
wanted to
apologies,
Yes.
I'm not indicating, I apologize, I understand now how I was unclear. I'm not saying that it's implied, I'm saying that's how we should write it. We should write it such that it flows up to the mayor.
And I'm saying that it would be,
I'm advocating.
I think it would be better to add language that says that a temporary administrator may be appointed by the mayor, and it does not preclude the mayor from being that temporary appointee. Because if the mayor does not feel that they are up to that role, then they can appoint somebody else.
As acting.
Right. That the only persons, not allowed to be that temporary designee would be a council person.
So they get two salaries?
No.
So my question is, what's to prevent, where's the check balance in that? So the person has a stroke, they're incapacitated for the next 2 years of their life, and the mayor is suddenly the administrator, we're back to the mayor and council form of government. So they can just be, what's the temporary nature of it? Like, do we need to define that?
Well, we need to define at what point, the line has been drawn in the sand and they have to hire another full-time administrator or whatever,
What is-
part-time,
Are you also
full-time.
saying?
Council resolution is the answer to your question.
Do we
Council could
appoint-
pass a resolution saying, we find that the administrator has been gone too long, and the mayor shall forthwith engage in the process of appointing.
That's kind of HR law or something. I mean, would it be more human resources?
What would be administrator?
What were you gonna
I
say?
said, do we define whether or not the administrator is going to be approved by council?
It's hired and fired by mayor with the approval of a majority vote of council.
Are you gonna do a majority for the appointee as well?
Yeah.
Because I don't want the mayor to hire her best friend and now you're the administrator.
Yeah, I would, any appointment at all of the administrator role.
Then I would be fine with the mayor appointing somebody temporarily with the approval of council. And you wouldn't have any nefarious.
Fine.
And that's fair.
And I'm gonna throw in language saying that during any time period that the mayor is also performing the duties of administrator, they don't get double paid. Everybody cool with that scheme? All right. 15, process to remove the administrator. I feel like we've already covered that in the sense that just like the mayor hires, the mayor fires, and again, but because it's administrator, it's again done with approval of the majority of council. Everybody on the same page?
Some of the charters have like hearings, et cetera. There, we need to go with that.
If people wanna have a hearing, we discuss that right now.
I'm a little confused about that, because that's a position that technically would have an initial and then an annual performance review. And then there'd be a chain of, there'd be a process of corrective action, and we're not even talking about that.
I'm in favor of keeping it really simple and keeping it more or less at will. If we're going to involve council, then it should be a majority vote of council. Anything beyond that gives a disgruntled administrator grounds for a lawsuit.
So
Oh, the hearing wasn't followed exactly to the letter. Oh, I didn't get enough notice for the hearing. Oh, they didn't post notices so that the public could attend.
Yeah.
I'm suing the government for firing me.
That's a true story. That's a true story.
So you're saying that you don't want to have those specific details?
I'm saying that if I had my way, the mayor would be able to fire the administrator. Done, but I was outvoted. So I want to keep it as simple as possible. If the mayor determines that the administrator needs fired, then they take it to council. Council holds a vote. If 4 members of council agree, then the administrator is fired. Done.
So, somebody mentioned that they're not employees of the village, they're more like contract hires. Because I was just gonna say, why would an administrator, if they're an employee, be treated differently than any other employee that would be?
Because their job is so much bigger, and because they're getting special duties in the charter itself as opposed to just whatever sheet of paper the mayor throws out.
So I agree with everything you said, but I have a question. One of the earliest complaints or things called out about a charter and an administrator is that the people don't have direct say over that administrator. What mechanism could we, or is there a mechanism that is reasonable to give the people a voice, a direct voice in that administrator? So
Giving the people the voice of their representatives and saying, yes, hire this person.
well, sure, so we elect a mayor, but now the mayor.
No, I'm saying that we've already solved that, Brian, with requiring that council approves hiring the administrator.
Okay, so I'm not disagreeing. I think I'm playing the provocateur. I'm trying to
Sure.
raise somebody specific question, right?
Sure.
Because it had a robust discussion months ago, and I just want to make sure we're on the record here, having considered this, right? There was an example thrown out of some municipality somewhere that had an administrator that was, in this person's opinion, derelict in their duties, that the people were trying to remove them, but because the mayor wasn't an issue, the mayor was apparently friendly with this person in some way, and not enough council people were willing to force an issue, they were stuck with an administrator they felt was not.
To me, that's taken care of in the election time.
I don't disagree.
I agree, initiative, recall, and regular election.
I don't disagree, and again,
Right.
as a provocateur, I'm trying to make sure that this has been considered in this room.
Anita?
Yeah.
I said my thoughts on this. I'm concerned about performance review.
Right.
And maybe doesn't fit here.
Here's an idea that might actually solve both of your concerns. What if we wrote in a requirement, so everything stays the same as what we had already kind of agreed to. The mayor hires, council approves, mayor fires, council approves. The hiring is re-voted on every year. Every year, the mayor has to go back to council and say, or every 2 years, what if we built a periodic requirement in that, we're not gonna sign just a perpetual contract with this administrator, it's gonna be a 1-year contract or a 2-year contract. And that contract, basically at its expiration date, the mayor goes back to council and says, I wanna rehire this person, I think they're doing a bang up job. At that point, council gets to have another majority vote.
Well, typically that's in the contract, isn't it? That you have a review period. and-
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, like we just build a vote.
You just require that in the contract.
Yeah, I like to hear the idea of hire. Yeah.
Is there does that solve both of your?
Well, that would certainly go a long way in, helping me feel more comfortable. I mean, I find it somewhat amusing, unless we have a very good job description, that, theoretically, a person who has less skills and abilities administratively would be evaluating the performance of somebody who has a high level of, so it requires a good job description or a very good, clear contract language, so it's very clear that they're doing a good job, or they're doing a good job on these 4, but on these 3, not so much. I mean, there has to be a way to, I just
There's
feel
more
like,
to it, there's more to it too than just, I know how to fill out forms really well.
oh, right,
Or I know how to, manage the police officers really well. If the mayor is literally receiving 10 complaints a week about this administrator because they're just a jerk to deal with,
right.
that can be a reason for the mayor to go at the next performance review, go, hey, look, their technical performance is fine, but they're not a good fit for the village. I want to fire them.
I agree with that, and of course,
It's a good checks and balances.
right, and it does insinuate being a good documenter and a good communicator related to keeping track of negative input that's unsolicited from village, citizens.
Well, I like the idea of having an annual review that's public.
Would it be annual or would it be?
Well, I like the idea of voting.
Well, the contract would make it an annual review, basically.
Well, that's what I'm asking is, would it just be on the term of the contract, whatever contract is negotiated, or would we want to build in a yearly or biannual?
I feel like we're making this much too specific.
Are we though? We're getting a specific concerns from members of the charter.
I think if you have a bad administrator, you have to have the thing is, if you have a bad administrator and you have a mayor that's also like, doesn't care, they're
Doesn't care, we're different, nepotism,
You
blah.
have to
I like
have,
all that, I just don't like defining what contracts per se.
okay, maybe not in the contract, but if you did define, well, if you defined it either every year, every 2 years, there is a vote of confidence or vote to continue the contract by the council, and they've got to vote
Renewal.
for a majority of the
Contract renewal,
It's a contract.
does all that, though. Contract renewal, so.
Well, right, but what we're getting at with this idea is, so if we don't do this additional requirement, then the way it would work is year 1 of the mayor's term, mayor hires an administrator, gets 4 members of council to agree. And then for the next 4 years, let's say that contract is a standard 1-year term contract, for the following 3 years, the mayor, without ever going to council, can just sign their name to the next year's
That's the
renewal.
concern.
And we have that administrator for the rest of that mayor's term.
It has to be ordered by the council.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Not unless we add this in to say that in order for the mayor
I
to
see that.
renew the contract, they have to go back to the council and get another 4 members of council to agree.
I would agree with that.
I'm with that.
That's all I was suggesting.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That actually helps for the public too, because if they're not satisfied, tell the council members.
Yes.
I'm not satisfied, a year is a reasonable amount of time.
So,
So, what if the mayor negotiates a 2-year term contract though? Because it's a contract, you can negotiate a 4-year term if you really wanted to.
well, even mandate that has to be approved by council.
So if that were the case, right, then maybe the language should, I heard vote of no confidence, that council would have an annual requirement to have a vote of confidence, no confidence.
So what if council forgets and doesn't have to vote? Does the administrator automatically lose their job?
No, then we have to assume that a lack of a vote of no confidence is an assumed vote of confidence.
Can we just require it to be?
Council can do a vote of no confidence at any time.
And going back to
Can't
Sam's
just
point,
look back and prove everything.
Then just allow it.
why is this a contract as opposed to any other?
It's an assumption that we've made, and I agree that.
I'm 99% certain that it's industry standard for city planners to negotiate contracts as opposed to just being a W-2.
So-
We're not real estate anyway. At any point, we want to be better than employee, we get rid of employee.
If we make sure that that's in the contract.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Why do we have?
So Ohio will state unless you negotiate otherwise in an employment contract.
Exactly.
Now, most employment contracts include a catch-all at-will provision, but not automatically.
All right, so can we all agree that we feel like hiring and firing the administrator is a topic that needs discussion. And we want to have some sort of check/balance in place so that we have council approving the administrator every year. Whatever that looks like, if you like the idea. Okay,
I can absolutely draft some proposed language, I'll work it with Paul if I need to.
yes.
Okay.
Have we defined what the administrator does? We've got 45 minutes
Yes.
left, and I would love to review that.
There were some things that we can come back to, but I think defining what administrator does was
Straight out there.
straight out of, we really like how Pickerington.
This is pretty straightforward. Hold on, I gotta find Pickerington.
Not the same as straight out of Compton.
Not hardly.
Not the same.
That's which part of Pickerington?
Was it Pascal or was it? Okay.
I think, and, powers of duty.
The task city.
All right,
Yes.
so chief administrative official of the city, also responsible to the mayor for the broader administration of all affairs of the city. And to that end, subject to the provisions of this charter. They shall have the power and shall be required to appoint and remove all employees of the city in the manner provided in this charter. Prepare budget estimates annually, submit them to council, and administer the appropriations adopted by council. Prepare and submit to council and to the public annually, not later than January 31st, a complete report of the finances and administrative activities of the city for the preceding year. Keep council informed of the current financial condition and future needs of the city. Delegate to subordinate city employees any duties conferred upon the administrator by this charter or by council action, and hold them responsible for their faithful discharges. See that the laws and ordinances are enforced, and perform such other duties not inconsistent with this charter as may be required by the council or the ORC. That's everything in the powers and duties in Pickerington.
Right, and then just making sure that everybody understands the way we've kind of agreed that this is gonna work on the ground is that all of these duties are done by the administrator with oversight from the mayor. So when they appoint or remove an employee of the city, they're gonna be talking with the mayor and saying, hey, I'm gonna fire Officer Bob. Well, maybe not Officer Bob, but groundskeeper Willie, and the mayor gets to have some input on that.
Do you remember what that?
This is just a very technical thing. It says January 1st for the financial report.
That's at 31st.
31st, January 31st? Okay,
No later than.
no later than January 31st. Could we make it February 15th? There's a specific reason that certain finances have to come down to us from the state, and they're not ready for another couple of weeks after that.
Yes.
I mean, I need to find it March 1st.
I'm fine with March 1st too.
We could have it be due when the taxes are due.
So are we gonna have a finance director also, like we do
But then
now?
reports to the administrator.
Okay, because when it talked about, administering the appropriations, but that's through the finance director.
There's one that in here that I feel like is missing, and I don't think we've defined it either way. And it's in somebody else's charter. Is it? Anyway, it's in somebody else's charter that I can't figure out right now, but it addresses execute on behalf of the city all contracts, agreements, except as otherwise provided in this charter. Who's the one who can execute on contracts?
I think that's the administrator.
And that is in Grove Park.
Thanks.
I don't like the word faithful discharges.
You want it to be in there? Oh.
No, number 5, it says faithful discharges.
Oh, I understand.
What's faithful mean?
Oh, that's a term of art.
Yeah.
Faithful discharge of duties.
In good faith.
It means doing something in good faith, meaning, so that's a legal term of art.
It is, oh,
He did something that was stupid, but he did it in good faith. So, but the contracts, I think, is something that we keep banning about, and we haven't actually given anybody, mayor, administrator, anybody, the actual authority of contracts.
Yeah, so if the administrator reports to the mayor, I feel like the mayor should be the one that's actually signing the contracts. the administrator can absolutely make recommendations to the mayor saying, this like company is going to be the better one for us. That, I feel like that is where their skill is gonna come in, is looking through the contracts and going, this company is gonna be better for us versus this company, and here's the reason why. Presenting that to the mayor, so the mayor can actually sign the contract, because the mayors are elected
I
official.
don't agree with that.
And the mayor and the administrator reports to the mayor. In my job, I make recommendations on, let's get training from this company, or let's buy software from this company, but I don't sign anything, I don't buy anything, my boss does that.
So it does
I think
not-
there should be a money limit. I think
But this
administrators
isn't
should.
how it works. This isn't how the process works. The council or a subcommittee determines, weighs out what companies we're gonna use, like for instance, trash.
But why are we having a
subcommittee
subcommittee
does
of
that.
council do that? if
Yeah,
we're
that
having
should not be,
That's how
that
it
should be
works.
what the administrator is doing, going, I understand, Jen, that that's how things work now. I don't understand why council, any subcommittee of council is deciding which company we're gonna go with. They should be saying, we think that this project needs done, we should spend this amount of money on it, administrator go.
It doesn't make any
Yeah,
difference,
so
it
I
doesn't make
think-
any difference at all.
I think that's the
Because the
question.
council can do that, and the mayor can say, no, I'm not gonna use that.
Well, but that's the next, we're gonna change that, so that's the point.
So the typical way that the legislative process works is that the legislation will read that, we are authorizing, currently the mayor, we are authorizing our agent to engage in a contract with this
X
company to provide these services
Right.
at a cost not to exceed so many dollars.
Yeah, I don't wanna take the council out of this part of the situation. Now, actually signing the contracts, I'm fine with the administrator doing it or the mayor doing it, but the who and what and how much money, that's the council's purview.
Is there
Why?
a monetary limitation to that?
Right, because we've talked on council many times about having an amount under which, yes, the mayor, the administrator, let's just get business done and
I'm
spend the
down
money.
for that.
As long as the money's
So,
been
I
appropriated.
guess that's my thing. What I just don't understand is why, if we're gonna have a mayor and an administrator, why are we still trying to say that a subcommittee of council should spend 6 months choosing between 10 different groundskeeping services and then writing legislation saying, you will choose groundskeeping service number 4, you will execute we've done all the work, we're writing a law saying you have to sign a signature. I don't get that.
I believe that, at least in my head, the way I envision that happening is that the administrator would be informing that the council or the subcommittee that makes the recommendation, right, they would be engaged in that process. That's why we want that professional to be engaged in professional processes, because it is council who decides to spend the money. Now, how can you expect a council person to be satisfied to spend the money without knowing who the money is going to, right? So if you are expecting council to just say, yes, we want groundskeeping services,
And we're willing to pay
And
up
willing
to
to pay-
this amount.
right? I, as a council person, would want to know the quality before I write the check.
So,
And there's no way I, as a council person, would agree to write the check without knowing who I'm writing the check to.
so.
No way.
Let me ask you this, does it make a difference if it is groundskeeper or maintenance versus capital expense? Is that where the difference is, or do you guys care just as much about trash as you do about buying?
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I do think that, there are certain things that we'll have to talk about concerning dollar limits. But no, it doesn't matter to me. The services to the village, if we're talking about trash, maintenance, if we're talking about the stuff that actually affects people's lives, that's very important. It's as important to me as the expense of building a new community building.
So here's my
It affects
question.
my life.
So here's my question. How do we avoid a scenario in which the administrator spends 6 months searching for a service and negotiating a contract, and then says, all right, let's take it to council to get the necessary appropriations. Meanwhile, for the exact same 6-month period, some subcommittee of council has been doing the exact same thing, and they come up with their own. And here we have wasted government money.
You should be the administrator supposed to be in all of these.
We,
In every single subcommittee, meeting, all the time ever.
I
They
think
should be good.
that's one of the things that the gentleman in Johnstown said, he attends all council.
that's one of the things that I expect from an administrator is that they're gonna work very closely with the council. And everybody's gonna get everybody else's buy-in. Or if it's so controversial, shit doesn't get done. And they have to go back to the drawing board and figure something else out.
Okay, so would it be the fact, because we want council to be involved, but we also want council to begin to do some real policy kinds of things and strategic things. So council, that subcommittee says, well, here's what we're looking for in a service, da, 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 da. And then the administrator goes out, they find out who does that, they find out who the people are, they get some, bid, then they bring it back to that subcommittee and say, like, here are the 5 people that do a good job of this. And what else do you want to know? And yes, that subcommittee helps make that decision, but they're not doing the groundwork. They're not actually calling the
I think that's
asphalt.
completely legitimate, and also the administrator could say to the subcommittee, actually, on point A, B, and C, you're unrealistic. And here's why.
So what that tells me then is that's something we should write into the duties of the administrators.
Yes.
They are not just expected to show up and sit there, they're expected to actually work with
Hand in
the
hand.
various subcommittees
Hand in hand, absolutely.
to, I don't know, we gotta come up with language.
Because we don't want to set up a scenario where they're instantly fighting and they're fighting to the bitter end on every single thing. We want them to work together. We want them to collaborate and make these decisions.
So we have a council person who has a piece of input, since we're talking about talking to council, we might as well ask the council person, what is that?
Let me talk for a minute about what it looks like when the system, to my belief, is actually working correctly. We just went through an issue with how are we going to fix the pool? What Kelly was just describing as a bug, I actually really think can be a feature. The resolution to the pool issue was investigated by the office of the mayor, whether that side of the government includes an administrator, as it obviously will, so much the better. And then that issue, how are we going to fix the pool, was investigated by council. It came up that there were 3 separate options: paint it over again, strip it down and sandblast it and redo it, or put in a liner. The mayor came up with her preferred solution. Council came up with our preferred solution. We came to a work session with 2 defined solutions. We talked through in a very productive way the strengths and weaknesses of those 2 solutions, and both bodies, as a matter of checks and balances, were able to investigate multiple solutions, come to the table. The council ultimately, with the power of the purse, gets to decide on those long-term projects, because we can make our appropriations very specific. But we certainly listened to the mayor and her assertions, and we went with her suggestions on the baby pool. If people want more specifics, we can handle that after the meeting. We went with her suggestions on the baby pool. We went with council's suggestions on the main pool, and because both bodies independently were able to do their own investigations and prepare their own bids, we ended up, I don't believe, wasting the government's money, but ending up with the best product possible.
Okay, so first of all, kudos to you guys for doing that.
It really does.
That's like awesome that you were able to do that. That is like the way we want our government to work, regardless of the form of government. So yay, council and mayor worked together and did it right.
So that's the way it works now, and
But-
that's great and all, but we're hiring an administrator and paying them a lot of money.
Right, and that unfortunately has been the exception to the rule.
I understand
Unfortunately.
that, but I still very strongly believe that if we're going to add on the executive side of the balance an administrator, you still have to allow council to do its own investigative work. Otherwise, you're hamstringing them in terms of, you're expecting them, me as a council person, to vote for certain items only given the information that we are given by the executive branch.
How is that happening if council tells the administrator up front what it is that they want?
Because it's a matter of who does the administrator work for, and they can only serve one master. And I truly believe that independent, I look a little bit to the federal government. Independent investigation of an issue is not a waste of time or money. It serves everybody.
So I gotta say that I do disagree. I do think it's duplicative work, but I do
Well, now we
agree
agree, so-
but I do agree that at the end of the day, the council are the ones holding the purse strings, right?
Yeah.
So look, if the administrator brings to a subcommittee or brings to a general meeting of council a crappy proposed legislation, I only looked at one company because it was all I had time to look at, and I didn't really price check, and I didn't really look at any reviews, but here's the company that I think we should use to reline the pool. Council can say, no, we're gonna vote this down, and we're gonna tell you why, and then the administrator has to come back with, all right, I looked at these 5 companies, here's 3 to choose from.
So in your scenario, the administrator is the one doing the legwork for the council.
I feel like that's what we're paying them
Which-
for.
I see what you're saying, Pam?
I think, and I'm agreeing with everybody, the problem is that there are more projects than the council members can handle, because while you're getting all that information on the pool, who is looking at the dredging and who's looking at da-da-da, and you have to, that's why things don't get done,
Yes.
because there's too many things to
Yes.
get done.
To
And
be-
so you have to find a way so that the administrator is doing some of the work, so that gets done, and then council can be, but to have both of them doing exactly the same work isn't multitasking.
So here's maybe, I got confused somewhere, because what I thought Kelly was originally suggesting was that the legislation would be the council is authorizing the village administration to provide, to complete pool maintenance, not to spend more than this many dollars.
I've given up on that.
And then leaving it to the administrator to shop and spend, right? I don't think that was ever, right, so,
And I got a pretty good sense that no one agrees with me on that.
so,
Some of the shopping.
well, yeah, right, but I think that in the end, we can always expect, the final piece of legislation to pass is say, council is authorizing our agent,
ABC pool company.
right, to hire this company to do this service at this price. Now, who does that shopping? I would certainly, and certainly the administrator should be involved, right? I think that is part of the balance that anybody that gets hired for that role and will have to work with council is going to have to work out, right? But we should list in there.
And at the end of the day, without a drastic rewrite of my legislative articles, please God, no, we're not gonna be able to prevent a council subcommittee from going on its own anyway.
Yeah.
And that's why we have the mayor's ability to veto, right? If that council decides to hire, Councilman Y's cousin, just because they're Councilman Y's cousin, then the mayor shall veto.
I just do think that I wanna write in a special affirmative duty with the administrator, requiring them to consult on subcommittee projects or something like that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm wanting to see.
So I think,
That's all.
I was gonna say, I think that part of what
You're okay with that?
I think that part of what we're trying to do is just streamline this. We're not saying that it's bad that everybody looks at it and brings everything to the table. We're saying that that's just inefficient. We have that time, that's why nothing gets done. It's when your boss knows how to do your job, has to do it for you, while paying you to sit there and watch them, it's just dumb. So, what we're trying to do is streamline that. I would say Kelly, take a stab at it, let's see what you come up with.
Did you come up with a dollar amount threshold where they can do it?
No,
Nope, that's next.
So-
So contracts.
Yeah, we do need to figure that out with contracts. We
Who's
need to
signing
contract
contracts, what the threshold is for what's.
At the end of the day, I think procedurally, I am more comfortable with Sarai's suggestion of requiring the mayor to be the ultimate signatory on a contract. They're the elected official, the administrator isn't. And frankly, the mayor's job is to oversee oversee the administrator, right? So,
That's why it doesn't make any difference. If you either have the administrator or the mayor, I'm fine with having the mayor because the administrator is not gonna sign anything the mayor doesn't want that person to sign.
Well, in theory, but I think the mayor's a check. Right,
Yeah,
check the balances.
Yeah, I think it's legitimate to say that anybody that reports to that position mayor is not gonna go against the mayor, they'll fire them and say, you're not gonna sign that contract. I
Are
don't think
there
it's.
little nicky, little contracts that just don't?
So, right, so I think the dollar amount comes into play when it's not a contract for services or ongoing effort, but rather a purchase order, right? So
I'm
we have,
gonna approve that we spent $40 on Kansas spray.
or we're spending $2,000 to replace a couple computers, right? What's the threshold at which that has to go to council, right? So they're buying toilets for the pool, right? That's $500. Does that need legislation to spend $500 on toilets for the pool?
I wanna, will you clarify for me how this would look from start to finish that you would feel comfortable with?
I think I'm perfectly fine having the mayor sign. You're either gonna have the mayor or the city administrator sign contracts.
Yes.
One of the two.
Yeah.
I personally do not believe, just based on my work experience, I'm not going to sign a contract that my manager does not want me to sign. It's just not gonna happen. So
What is your solution to that?
I would have the mayor sign. But I would also have to be very careful with thresholds and who gets approval. I'm more concerned with who's approving the amount of money that is being appropriated for a contract than I am who signed it. I don't think it's any different.
All right, so signature side.
So signature aside, really what we're talking about is what is the dollar amount
Yes.
threshold below which you do not need a council resolution or ordinance approving.
What is that now?
Is it- Oh, anyone?
So it's funny because, I don't know that if there is one, it's clearly defined or stated and it is used loosey-goosey.
Yeah.
So sometimes our administration will say that they don't like to do anything without a resolution. Other times
They'll,
it'll
Do-
use things.
Here's our opportunity.
Yeah.
If this is a long-term thing, then prices go up.
Well, it's also.
They'd have someone maybe set those rates every year or.
well, I think that regardless of the price going up.
If I would throw out a number, I probably would defer to council members, but I'm thinking like $5,000, something like that,
So
where I don't know what it makes sense though.
I think that's a reasonable number. I think that the council check on that is that it's of previously appropriated funds, right? So, because the way the government spends money is that council appropriates funds for purposes. So the council can appropriate funds for for the general administration of the village, right?
Here's what I don't like, and here's what I think we I don't want to do, okay, I'm gonna do a check for 4,000 on this day. Tomorrow, I'm doing another check for 4,500, the next day it's a check for 4,000. That's what I think we should have some kind
Well,
of.
there are statutory rules regarding that, like there's cases.
It's
Yeah, you can't.
With or without a charter,
So
you
then-
can't split it up like that, you get in big trouble.
like, so if you
As
have.
it's documented, that's okay. I
Yeah.
want to buy it.
So here's my thoughts, right? So if council were to appropriate, the general fund, some dollar amount, so we'll say 40 grand for the ongoing administration of the village, and then the village administrator has the ability to spend up to $5,000 without additional authorization. That would then allow the administrator to, 2 years ago, we had mold remediation here in the building, right? Well, because there was no way to do that, it was over what they say is the 2,000, I think is what they say is the current threshold.
That's what they say, those.
Right, that, so then it had to go to council, right? Well, there's not necessarily, nobody's gonna disagree that we should get rid of the black mold in the building. There was no reason for that, so 5,000, I think, is a reasonable bucket, but the total bucket is appropriated by council. And if we run out of the bucket, then you have to go back to council. And every penny that the village spends is all in reports, it's all open for the public to see.
So would it make sense to have certain buckets established per year, operating funds, maintenance funds, or whatever, that are just automatically approved?
They do it
Because they're
for
no
appropriations.
I think it would annual appropriations bill that sets all that up. I
Okay,
would
and then
not
anything
want,
that goes outside
And
of
then they
that,
pass the additional ones as emergencies.
well, yeah, sometimes things have to be.
So it's encouraged me, and I think OVET's warned us about this, at least tangentially. If we put a dollar amount in the charter, then that dollar amount is the dollar amount until
Until
the charter review gets approved by a vote, so we may need to be careful of that. So maybe instead of a hard dollar amount, we put in a request, because this is obviously a concern for a number of people, right? In terms of being able to actually get this done. So instead of putting $5,000, like written out in the charter, maybe we need to put in a provision saying that council shall approve, council shall include in council rules, or council shall pass an ordinance each year, or something like that, setting that dollar amount.
What if we say it has to be $5,000 and council can increase it? So that way they don't have the power to decrease it because
no, you're still
Inflation.
at 5,000.
This may not be where we put it. I think though that there might be, when we get back into administrative departments or.
Yeah, I guess I'm most concerned, does the position of mayor have the ability to write a $5,000 check to something, to contract something, or to purchase something that does not have the approval of the council?
The short answer is yes,
Yes.
if we give them a threshold. If we give them a floor, even if the floor is $200, then that means the mayor can hire their brother to rake leaves for $200 every,
That's what I guess that's
So
what
we
I'm trying
give
to
the
do.
administrative power.
well, you know what I mean.
Right,
You know what I mean.
the mayor could go and buy from their brother a $200 chainsaw.
Yeah, and that would not require council to be informed, let alone vote on it.
It's to trust somebody.
Right, I think that's fair.
Yeah, no, Yeah, and there are times that if you don't have that ability, it slows down everything.
It
And
does.
it's been interesting because council could have passed a resolution
Yes.
to set a limit under which you could just do it, and they were reluctant to.
I believe that goes back to the institutional knowledge that I mentioned before, is that because the prevailing wisdom is that there is a $2,000 limit. Right, that is, and unless a council person is so inclined to go and dig that out and actually find it, we tend to fall back on the institutional knowledge, and then you have an administration who,
Uses it when appropriate, or uses it when convenient.
When convenient.
Right.
Well, as
So-
the current council member, what is your thought on this? I mean, what do you perceive to be the current limit that the current mayor, or the position mayor can purchase something without your knowledge?
My understanding is that the mayor is limited to previously appropriated funds. And so long as those funds are used for the purpose to which they are appropriated, the mayor has reasonably wide latitude to go ahead and sign the check, so to speak, so long as that money has already been
But
appropriated.
some of those
Now,
line items are
sometimes-
in the tens and tens of thousands. of
Right.
dollars.
And now sometimes it's ABC Pool Company to sandblast the pool, and sometimes it's the budget for the police department.
Right.
And the budget for the police department then gets broken down into its own 18 or 60 line items. And then that way, when we go and buy a stop sign, this is an actual example, we don't need a separate council resolution on a stop sign. And we don't even need a check cut from the mayor, the chief of police just goes and buys a stop sign and it comes out of his, the $23 for the stop sign or whatever it is, comes out of his budget,
But
all of already appropriated money.
But I think the follow-up question is that one stop sign is $23, so that's below any perceived threshold. So now let's think about if it was from previously appropriated funds, because we already said all this expenditure has to be appropriated. But now it's, we're replacing, for whatever reason, state law changed how stop signs have to look. And we have to change all of our stop signs, and that is $2,300.
So,
So at that
what
point,
I'm now realizing, how often is it that we're needing that we're gonna need the administrator to purchase something out of funds that haven't been already appropriated? How often is that actually gonna happen?
It's a limit.
It's again, so the things that are appropriated for, it'll sound specific, so the police budget, right? But then if it's over a threshold, like a police cruiser is something that we are always passing legislation.
So let me rephrase my question. If the rule were, there is no threshold, it's just, if it's already appropriated, you get to write the check with no further vote. If it's not already appropriated, then you need to go to council. Would that actually hinder the day-to-day governance of Minerva Park?
Potentially, because then it comes down to how those appropriations are written, right? Then you would fall under a what's the word I want to say here? A regime where then your appropriations will be written very specifically. We appropriate these $50 for office supplies. We appropriate, and that then becomes a ordinance.
For instance,
okay.
legal services, they'll appropriate $70,000 for legal services. That doesn't mean that the contract for, our legal counsel's legal.
Was for a flat fee of $70,000.
Right,
Yeah.
no, and nobody can write that. So at what threshold could they write
I see now.
and then have it be?
so from
Go
a,
ahead.
okay. From the standpoint of, say, buying a police cruiser, the reality of the matter is somewhere in between the council rights such that it's $50 for this office supply and you have $8 to buy the stapler, and you get up to $500,000 to, you get up to $1.5 million to run the police department, and it only costs 1.1. The police cruiser, if they wanted a police cruiser, it is not in their budget to do so if they want to still pay their police officers. And let me tell you, they are good people and they want to pay their police officers. So if they want a new cruiser, they need to come to council, and it's by factor, not that they don't technically have the money in their budget, but because it's not in their budget.
Well, no, that makes sense.
Because council has done their job and appropriated the appropriate amount of money based on the needs of that department.
So one more comment and on the table.
And I think that's actually exactly what I was saying, because I think we should get input from Kim Cooley on this, our fiscal administrator, right?
Oh,
Fiscal
yes,
officer.
we do need.
Because the question I think that we're really trying to ask is, hey, Kim, at what point do you feel that you are hamstrung by having to go
The
to
council
council
every time.
to ask for approval to spend money, right? At what point is it a bigger pain for you than, where does the juice equal the squeeze? And then we can try to set something.
I'm afraid I have an
remember
answer
that
to that,
phrase
but I think you may not.
So I'm gonna table it, because we've only got 10 minutes left, and then we give you guys here. So the first question I want to ask is, Kelly, what do you need from us so you can lead the draft for us?
Really, I need that threshold question answered. I know I'm gonna be asking, and I'm gonna be sending an email to Paul about,
Leave the precedent, or reason for the administrator being able to use the department, so whatever that.
yes.
It's the mayor and, leave it
The whole leave of absence thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna see if there's maybe some better language out there that he knows of. I'm gonna do some research on my own. I've got answers for basically the rest of this.
Okay, do you have enough to draft 5 and 6? You said you're not gonna have enough for this Thursday, right?
Well, I'm not gonna be here this Thursday. I can have a draft ready for review in 2 weeks
Okay,
with what I've already got.
okay, so for our meeting this Thursday,
We've asked Paul to send us Article 7. You guys will do what we just did, for Article 7, which I wanna say is administrator. I don't have it in front of me.
okay,
Administrative departments. So you guys will discuss the memo on Article 7, send me those notes, and then theoretically, the following Thursday, I will have drafts of Articles 5, 6, and 7. Obviously, we won't be able to make it all the way through 3 articles in one meeting, but I'll theoretically have them ready to go.
so we're not meeting next Sunday, just a heads up. If we're reviewing Article 7 next week, do we want to ask him fully to come for the first hour meeting so we can bring about what her struggles are, what questions we have for her?
I think that's a good idea, because Director of Finance is in Article 7.
I mean, on the promise you make.
Yeah, it looks like
Ask her for-
having her and Eric on Thursday might probably be, yeah.
May I make a further suggestion, if she's willing to do it? Board of Zoning Appeals is something would also be included in this. Is that something that you could maybe just have material ready to talk about? If all of the zoning stuff,
Anybody's getting something.
If possible, can everybody in the room send me kind of their summary on the financials, what your takeaway is as far as the questions we need to ask him? Because I think everybody hears things differently, and either we're all asking the same question in 17 different ways, and yes, I realize there are 17 of us in the room, or we all have very different questions, and I just want to understand what those are so that we can, in an organized fashion, ask him to present information for us. Is that fair?
I also have a question on the things in the previous drafts you've done, Kelly, that we're gonna come back to later, like clerk of council and such. We're gonna go through the whole thing and then we're gonna come
eventually
back
we're
and
gonna have to,
start
Yeah.
hitting off. Well, that's good.
We'll be having some
Then we'll have a more cohesive idea.
yeah, that's why I've been color coding it in red, so that we can, on a skim through, you can see what stuff we're still needing to approve.
And then I had another question. Somebody said, not 2 questions. Somebody said, ask Eric to attend. Is there something specific or you just look for like general?
Well, city planner or village planner is, it's in administrative departments, so we'll have to, I guess maybe in front of him, discuss whether, with the mayor and administrator, whether we still need a village planner.
I just didn't know if we need to ask him to prepare something or just
He's
kind of
gonna
prepare
say
the
yes.
conversation.
Well,
Wait on.
And he was already looking into something regarding zoning.
Paul said, I can't remember the answer to this question. Okay, so currently for building projects like MI, we hired Eric specifically to oversee the MI project because we had to. Statutorily, we had to. I can't remember what Paul's answer was.
Right, they're two different types of things, and if we're not gonna have any building developments, we don't need,
We do not need a village planner if we do not, but are we required still statutorily, even with a charter, to have a planner for building things?
only,
That's the question. I don't remember what you said.
When I was researching the difference between an administrator and a village planner, it appeared to me that if we are in the process of building things, like in my homes, then we need to have some sort of contract with a planner, not an administrator, because they're slightly different schoolings and they have different certifications.
So even if we have a charter,
Yes, because somebody has to know what building permits and things like that to apply for and sign off on and review. and the administrator is not necessarily gonna have the certification to sign off on it.
Right, I remember that part, I just didn't know whether it was, that
I
was
think
true even if you had
charter.
a charter.
Yeah, I think it's true even if you have a charter. Now, I think the village planner position could be a as-needed contract.
That was my understanding, it's
Yeah.
as needed contract, right?
Yeah,
We
so,
talked about that.
Yeah. So my other question is, do we have any questions that we want to revisit with Rob Novus? Do we feel like we have anything specifically to get that, hey, here, we've done it, don't write in the $5,000 limit because here's why, you know, that voice of experience, is that of value or no? Or do
We
we
just
already
had a
have?
conversation tonight at some point, or today, that I thought she, there was a nice answer about that, I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, and when we're talking about the relationship of the mayor to the administrator, and because interestingly,
I think it was.
he was talking about their relationship, and interestingly, oh, this online says theirs is a mayor council, but I don't know, somebody just hasn't updated that.
I've got a general question, getting back to if we hire a general contractor to build a specific building, doesn't the contractor take care of permits and stuff? Because whenever a building thing is, the contractor does all that for me with Franklin County, and I sign papers and it's done.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
if one person does one house in the village, you don't need a whole planner.
So if we build, I'm concerned about the community center, building a community center.
Right.
Yeah, no, you don't need
That's a different.
Yeah, we would use the same template for that. It's because Emma Homes is built
Yeah, I get
out of my
that.
house.
I'm just trying to think of the need.
it. Putting in sewer lines. and-
Yeah, I think it's because the sewer lines and things like that.
Thank you.
I do. Hey, I'm able to apply for it. I'm sure he'll be able to go after the administrator position.
So if somehow so let's say if the MI development completes, right, and the schools have 15 acres, and then the school decides to abandon it, and council rezones it such that it can be turned into houses, then we need someone to go through that process. That's our, in my opinion, our next most likely occurrence.
In the last 3 minutes, so do we, I'm gonna circle back, because I feel like I got a very fleshed out answer. Do we want to just ask some questions for Rob Novus? Do we want to ask him to come speak to us again? Things just-
I don't
I'd say just
feel
send them
like-
some questions.
I mean, if people have questions, I think they should send them to us and report back,
I don't think we need to come.
but I don't think
I
I.
think that's gonna come again.
Okay, so I think the voice of
If
the
we
village
have
was one of the questions.
Yeah, that helps.
Should we just email them to you?
Okay.
And you're gonna, can you send me a summary of the email, of the questions that we've talked about so far for me to ask all?
I only wrote down what you said.
I have general notes, I just wanna be able to double check myself. So if you guys, yeah, just send them to me, please.
As normal,
Yep.
send her questions to Kelly.
Right, I mean, I think that's valid, right? Go home, decompose, think about it, come back to it in front of a computer tonight or tomorrow, and just list out the questions that you still have, send them to Kelly and myself, and between us, we'll filter out what is Kim Foley or
Yeah.
legal or what have you. But just get them out there, just we're not gonna remember them all. They come for our filter, so. All right, fair enough.
Yep,
When do you leave?
Thursday,
Okay, so if we got questions to you by, say, Tuesday?
I can email and call.
How much
Okay,
cost the village to produce these?
50 cents.
and then I'm just gonna throw out there, we still need to talk about, community presentation.
Yeah, we do.
do.
Yeah, we do. And we had a tentative date of that of April 6th, we can
Yes, the meeting.
Okay.
I'll give you another bill for the signs.
I just gave you $20. Yes. And then. All right,
Oh, we have to.
I think you need to adjourn.
All
All in favor?
Aye.
Any questions?
No.
I'm sorry.